Okay, I'm back. So my comment, like, for some reason my Razer microphone isn't working right now. I don't know why. So it'll just have to be, it'll have to be like this. Unless I can like either get it fixed or I'll just have to use the PlayStation 5 controller, which is fine, but
Icewind Dale provides the yin to its yang by being
it's a
the
little
most
annoying
combat-oriented series out of the bunch. Compared to Baldur's Gate,
because I don't
less side
know
quests and more linear progression
how
from town to dungeon. Since town layouts are
I don't know
more simple
how
and there aren't
this
as many
works.
places to go, the experience is less overwhelming for those who've never played an RPG.
Because I haven't done it, but
follow your journey and pay attention to dialogue instead of following a quest area.
like I would have started over for the OBS, but I didn't want to redo the settings over again. It's kind of annoying, so I won't.
Some prefer the more restrained tone of Black Isle writing,
And I will never.
A welcome addition was the inclusion of full party creation. Unlike in Torment, you have to make your own party from scratch at the start of the new game. Though you don't have to make a full party, you can try to solo the game with just one character if you want to.
I wonder if I should play games with it.
Level when it comes to options, it's still very enjoyable to ponder what kind of
I deleted Call of Duty because I got bored.
You can choose your character's portrait and voice, though the
But
voice
I don't
options
know.
are kind of lacking.
Actually, you know what? I'll turn off the mic again, and I'll come back later. I do like how I sound, though. It sounds a little bit more bassy than the Razer. So, I'll talk later. Wait, no, I don't want to turn off the. I don't want to turn off the stream, the mic.
I've personally found the joy that seeing a party of my
Alright, see ya.
brings to me is greater than the benefits of pre-made party members, at least most of the time. Even though your characters don't talk or have their own personalities in classic CRPGs and dungeon crawlers, I found myself more attached to them than many written characters that are trying to engage me on some emotional level. I assume that's one of the reasons why so many D&D games have alignment systems that are useless. That way players could mentally roleplay their own party dynamic, as systemizing something like that would have been unfeasible. Like the name implies, the game takes place in an Arctic region at the northwestern tip of the fictional subcontinent of Faerun. The beautiful pre-rendered backgrounds really bring this area to life. You can just feel the cold air in your breath while enjoying the frigid atmosphere from the warm comfort of your home. This is one area where Icewind Dale surpasses Baldur's Gate in my opinion, in no small amount thanks to the soundtrack by Jeremy Soule, who later went on to compose the music of Skyrim. The character portraits are also really well drawn. It's a visually pleasing game that feels cozy to play. After expanding the first game with 2 content packs, Black Isle released a sequel 2 years later, which ended up being the swan song for the Infinity Engine. The most notable change was the move from 2nd edition of the D&D rules set to the 3rd. Other than that, it treads similar ground as the first game. Since the engine was the most matured at this point, this is where things like background art, combat AI, and encounter design reached its peak. However, the second title is usually considered the weaker offering out of the two. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to mention is that both Icewind Dale and Baldur's Gate games include the option of playing multiplayer, but I've never tried that, so I can't comment on how it works. The game that started it all was rebooted in 2001, when Stormfront Studios put out Pool of Radiance, Ruins of Myth Draenor. They had previously worked on Gold Box games, Neverwinter Nights, and Stronghold, but from '93 onwards, they mostly developed sports games. That might have affected their ability to make good RPGs, as this game is somewhat infamous for being an extreme disappointment for longtime fans. On the outset it looks nice. It has great visuals and a seemingly feature-rich turn-based battle system, but my game is bugged, so I can't personally tell whether the resentment stems from poor design and gameplay, or just lack of testing and bugs. Either way, you rarely hear anyone talk about this game, and when you do, it's nothing positive. It's a shame, as the game is superficially similar to the Temple of Elemental Evil. Troika's Temple of Elemental Evil is an interesting title. While other Troika games had great writing and original content but uneven quality due to their ambition, Temple of Elemental Evil is the complete opposite. It has very little content for an RPG. The setting and story are as generic as it gets, and there is no interesting characters or dialogue to speak of. But the gameplay is very polished, and the combat system is one of the all-time greats among RPGs. It was designed by the Fallout creator Tim Kaine, so it's no wonder that the mechanics and system design are above average. Another notable aspect of Temple of Elemental Evil is that it is the last major turn-based CRPG that was released before the genre died for about a decade. In the same vein, it was also the last Western RPG to provide players with the freedom of full party creation, as single-character action RPGs in BioWare's JRPG-inspired style of filling the player's party with extensively written pre-made characters became the norm for the genre during the 2000s. Being the last of its kind is a really unfortunate fate, as Temple of Elemental Evil made some notable improvements to the Infinity Engine formula. The turn-based battle system is robust and deep, while the interface made small helpful improvements, such as the ability to choose how long you want to sleep, a camera that automatically pans to an enemy's location if you click its combat icon, and being able to travel on the world map without exiting your current location. D&D players consider it to be the most faithful representation of the tabletop rules set seen in a video game, which is impressive, given that the 3.5 edition rules set that it uses was only released a few months prior. But even non-players who don't understand the rules can appreciate this game for its great combat and atmosphere. The game starts with party creation, but this time you have to choose the alignment of your party, which determines how the story begins. After that, you create 5 characters of fitting alignments. The character creation process is more extensive than in Infinity Engine titles, as this time around you can affect things like specific class specialization, height, and religion of your character. There's also an extensive list of feats, many of which have prerequisites for learning, which adds depth to the long-term character planning. Feats can range anywhere from item crafting and passive health and roll bonuses to additional benefits like cleave and increasing the duration or target area of a spell. Although Temple is only known for its combat, it's still worth noting that there are skill checks and dialogue choices, so talking to the same character with a smart and a dumb character yields different dialogue. While in one optional quest, you can choose to take a girl as your slave if you don't want to pay for her freedom and release her. The combat system incorporates a lot of new mechanical bells and whistles, such as differing weapon ranges, flat-footedness, empowered spells and feats, attacks of opportunity, power attack, and movement options such as a 5-foot step and readying against an approaching enemy, spell, or defending. The most notable feature which affects how the battles play out is the inclusion of attacks of opportunity. Each player has a visible perimeter around them, and if you run past it, that character automatically performs a free melee strike, even if it isn't their turn. This means that you've got to be careful how you move around the battlefield, and how you position your characters is important. Like in the Gold Box games, you can protect your casters by forming a defensive line in front of them. Each character has a tumble rating, which determines their chances of avoiding an attack of opportunity. You can also perform a 5-foot step to move your vulnerable characters away from nearby enemies without triggering an attack of opportunity. Even though the game is turn-based, it doesn't have random battles. Like in Dark Sun, the game will switch from real-time exploration to turn-based mode if you get near enough an enemy or attack one. After that, turns are divided based on your character's initiative ratings. On top of the screen, you can see a list of all participants in the battle and their turn order. So instead of teams taking turns beating each other up, characters will act individually. Each character has a set amount of energy to use during their turn, which is dependent on their attributes and inventory. The green bar is energy reserved for attacking, while the yellow bar is for movement. Though you can consume your green bar for non-combat actions such as accessing your inventory, stopping an unconscious party member from bleeding to death, or just moving further. While that system is deeper than in your average RPG, it's too binary. Even though there's a lot of nuances to the combat mechanics, the interface is remarkably simple to use, as right-clicking brings up a radial wheel that contains all the different spells and actions you might want to perform. While it takes some time to get used to, it's so simple that you could port this game for consoles, which definitely would not have worked with the Infinity Engine titles. There are also other features like that make the experience more beginner-friendly and intuitive in comparison, like spellcasting having clear visual indications for the area of effect. Character models are also more detailed and clearly animated, as you can expect from a newer game. Visually, the game is similar with the Infinity Engine games. It uses eye-pleasing pre-rendered backgrounds in tandem with some animated effects such as chimneys that spew smoke. The graphics are good, but the visual design doesn't reach the same artistic heights due to its lack of memorable areas. The soundtrack by Ron Fish makes up for that. It has a very unusual but nonetheless powerful yet relaxing ambient sound. Some of these songs sound more like Blade Runner than Dungeons & Dragons.
We're not being fair.
While the gameplay and atmosphere are top-notch, Temple isn't without its flaws. The pedestrian story can be overlooked, but a more fatal flaw is the lackluster encounter design, which fails to match the high standards of the battle system. The importance of designing good fights with clever AI cannot be overstated in a game like this, because in a single-player game, the combat is as deep and engaging as the encounters are. If most of them consist of copy-pasted goons that you can beat with the most basic of tank and spank strategies, all the depth and complexity of the battle system are for naught. Conversely, a game like Counter-Strike can feel extremely tactical despite the limited amount of ways to interact, simply because you're playing against other people. Of course, the games aren't in any way comparable with each other. But there are many RPGs with way more simplistic encounter design out there, and you can easily get wiped out in a few turns, if you play carelessly and don't think before you act. Some of the bigger skirmishes are very enjoyable, even if they lack challenge and variety. Since the game is based on an actual D&D module, it might be a case of developers copying its encounter design too slavishly in another medium where pre-scripted AI controls monsters instead of dungeon masters who can adapt to player choices. Whatever the case may be, the inadequate encounter design prevents this game from reaching its full potential. There is a mod pack called Circle of 8 that's still being updated. I've never played it, so I can't tell whether it focuses more on adding new content or tweaking the AI and rules to make the combat more tactical. But it's worth noting that the other two tactical RPGs that have a similar dedicated mod site are Jagged Alliance 2 and Final Fantasy Tactics, which both populate the highest echelon of RPG combat systems. If you play the unmodded version, Temple also lacks content. There are 2 cities, 2 dungeons, and a few small locations scattered around the world map. It's very short and compact for an RPG, even if said locations are more densely packed with interesting content than your average town or dungeon in a modern sandbox RPG. For a long time, Temple of Elemental Evil was considered to have the best battle system in any CRPG. Nowadays there's Divinity, Original Sin, that's largely modeled after it, but it uses a more flexible AP system and has interactive environments. So I don't know if you can call Temple a must-play anymore, as much as I like it, but it's still a high watermark for combat when it comes to official D&D video games. Although it's not the next game in a chronological order, Knights of Chalice is a good game to mention at this point. It's an indie game in its true meaning, developed by just one person and sold only at his personal website. The game uses a 3.5 edition rule set like Temple of Elemental Evil, and is similar in its use of feats and character creation. However, there are only a meager 3 classes and races available, plus we're back to rolling dice for stats. If you can look past that, the MS Paint visuals and elevator music, Knights of Chalice surpasses all preceding games in its implementation of turn-based D&D combat. All the new additions from Temple of Elemental Evil, like 5-foot steps, attacks of opportunity, and empowering spells are here, but there are also new features, such as bull rushing and grappling. The best part is the AI is smart enough to exploit all the intricacies of the battle system. An enemy wizard might throw a fireball to burn away your web spell, while a warrior might bull rush your character that's standing next to an entangled area, pushing him onto the area that's under the influence of that spell. That's what makes the game so challenging and deep. The AI is fiendishly clever. In most games, if you throw a grease puddle or a similar spell next to a choke point, all the enemies will obliviously rush through it.
Oh well.
Not only does this game surpass D&D games made by actual developers, it has better AI than most RPGs, period.
I do like that you can use it without...
sad if a bedroom production like this can beat
you can use it without
to produce. Of course, scripting
a cord.
AI is a
It can
much
be
bigger
wireless.
concern in a combat-focused project like this.
Because it's a DualSense controller.
So many big-budget games are when it comes to designing
So I can hook it up wirelessly, Bluetooth. That's pretty cool.
First-time players. It's not a hard game to get into once you get the hang of it.
It's pretty awesome.
The control scheme is user-friendly and easy to use, and the game contains an in-game atlas, which you can use to read up on
maybe it is
various
just the
rules, how
Razer
spells work and so on. This is one of the few modern games
microphone
modeled after
itself.
retro aesthetics and mechanics that actually surpasses the game it emulates. The developer, meachew, is currently working on Knights of the Chalice 2, which will increase the class selection from 4 to 22.
Alright, let's just go to the next one.
Hello and welcome to DM It All, a show where we talk about Dungeons & Dragons books and tabletop gaming history. In this episode, we'll try extra hard to live up to that premise, as we'll be analyzing the original edition of Dungeons & Dragons.
I will be gone for
to do that,
a
though,
while.
you'll have to go all the way back before the first edition, before Dungeons & Dragons, and even before the concept of tabletop role-playing itself.
Following that causation, now maybe you're correct, as a Christian, as a person who believes, let's create a criteria. Yes, I believe that God but I'm not asking whether I believe it's God. I'm asking about on the paradigm of...
The story of D&D began in the early 1970s with Gary Gygax in Chainmail, his first professionally published tabletop game. Chainmail was a miniatures war game similar to modern games such as Warhammer or Battletech, except Chainmail was created nearly a decade before either of those franchises. For those that don't know, wargaming is a hobby over a century old. The idea is to simulate large-scale battles using miniature figurines and modeled terrain. Players would compete with a customized army against another opponent. Chainmail was originally created by Jeff Parent, one of Gygax's wargaming associates at their club in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Gygax expanded upon Parent's rule set in wargaming newsletters and magazine articles until the product caught the attention of Guidon Games. Guidon Games was an Indiana-based wargaming company that would go on to hire Gygax for multiple projects. The company was founded in 1970, but it would only last 3 years before being shut down. Its Chainmail being Guidon Games' biggest success story. While Chainmail itself focused on realistic medieval combat, the first edition also came with a 15-page supplement for more Tolkien-esque fantasy settings. This was due to Gygax's wargaming group becoming bored of their typical medieval wargames, as well as the group itself being pretty big into Lord of the Rings. Gygax himself claims he was more of a fan of sword and sorcery style fantasy, like Conan the Barbarian, but he wanted to please his friends, so a lot of very specific Tolkien references made it into the game. This fantasy...
I'm saying it doesn't work in that paradigm. You see, that's a different argument. Wait a minute. I'm not saying we never learn from Sinstead. I'm not saying it never works. I'm saying it doesn't work in that system of thought.
Wait a minute. There's an exit sign.
So, half the people who hear what we're saying, they don't even understand that we're saying that.
Oh, we
critiquing the skeptic paradigm.
Oh, man.
And so my prediction here is that we're going to get one,
Classic,
the
dude.
Sam Harris skeptic side of things.
Ooh, man.
And I'm going to use David Hume to say, and I
The
don't even know
supplement
where
was
it's gonna go.
basically a
I'm just gonna say,
Tolkien
I'm gonna guess
ripoff,
that
but
this
it helped
is
generate a
like
lot of
that
ideas that
novel.
would become synonymous with
Sam,
D&D
did
in
you read
particular.
David Hume?
For example, the dragons
It was a more
introduced in
consistent
Chainmail
skeptic.
can be directly
You want us to
compared to the
rationalize
modern
our
chromatic D&D dragons. Trolls are also far more similar to their durable D&D counterparts, rather than the ogre-like trolls from the Lord of the Rings. The Chainmail trolls were instead based off of the much more fearsome trolls from Paul Anderson's Three Hearts and Three
I'm
Lions.
going to use
This novel would also serve to inspire D&D's alignment system and the Paladin class. Stronger human units, known as heroes and superheroes, were specifically introduced for this fantasy supplement, as player armies needed these stronger fighters to even stand a chance against trolls and dragons. Leveling up as a concept was not present, but these hero and superhero units would eventually become the power tiers for D&D's original combat system. Characters would essentially start out as random infantrymen and level up into heroes and superheroes over time. Perhaps the most significant connection between Chainmail and D&D is the Wizard unit. Many of the iconic wizard spells first showed up in the supplement of all places. Some major examples included Haste, Protection from Evil, Polymorph, and Anti-Magic Shout. Many of these spells function similar to the iconic D&D versions too, with Lightning Bolt firing in a straight line, while Fireball had a circular area
We'll
of
just
effect.
have to see. Now,
There were
the other thing
16
too
unique
is,
spells altogether,
remember,
and
there's
two
a difference
options for
between
missile abilities,
transcendental
making this the
meditation
most involved
and
unit of the entire supplement.
God.
There were even 6 tiers of the wizard class,
But I
with
could
sorcerers
make a
and warlocks serving as weaker versions with less spell power. D&D's other co-creator, Dave Arneson, was a wargaming fan from the University of Minnesota. Arneson met Gygax in 1969 at the Gen Con Gaming Convention, a convention founded by Gygax himself. The pair would go on to work together on a naval wargame for Guidon Games, titled Don't Give Up the Ship. Parallel to this, Arneson was also developing a Napoleonic wargame with his friend David Wesley. The game, called Braunstein, was an experiment by Wesley to add more players to the wargames at the time that usually included just 2 players and 1 referee. This was done by Wesley introducing more roles outside of just the military commanders. In Braunstein, a player could take on a non-combat position, like a banker or a mayor, and strive for different goals outside of violent conquest. This essentially established the idea of the role-playing game, with players identifying with a single unit instead of controlling an entire army. Arneson and Wesley took turns refereeing these games, and the role of the wargaming referee transitioned into what we would now consider a dungeon master. Wesley was ordered to active duty for the army in 1970, so Arneson was left with exclusive refereeing duties. He didn't want to continue developing Braunstein with Wesley gone, so he began brainstorming an alternative game for his friends to play. Arneson took inspiration from Gygax's fantasy chainmail rules and cooked up Blackmore, a system that would become D&D's first campaign setting. Blackmore had more sci-fi elements than most traditional D&D campaigns, with advanced space aliens showing up in their earliest adventures. Despite these anomalies, Blackmore introduced many other ideas that would become ubiquitous with a standard D&D game. For instance, Arneson's group controlled characters that would be consistent from session to session as they ventured for treasure and journeyed into dungeons. Arneson also strayed from the chainmail rules, creating new ideas such as hit points and character levels. In 1972, Arneson and Blackmore player David McGarry met with Gary Gygax to pitch McGarry's board game. The game was called Dungeon! And it was based on the
Quran right here in
Blackmore
front of me. What?
Gygax was interested in Blackmore after discussing
Where does that
it
say that the Torah
and
is
asked
from?
Arneson to referee a game for him. The experience convinced Gygax that this role-playing idea was the next big thing. He asked for a draft of Arneson's game rules and began running his own separate game called Greyhawk. The two collaborated over phone and mail while playtesting their separate campaigns. Greyhawk was based on Gygax's history knowledge, with the original map literally being a rebranded map of the real world. When Gygax initially presented Guidon Games with the role-playing premise, the company rejected it. But Gygax would not be deterred. Spurred on by his belief in the appeal of role-playing, as well as his fear that competitors would soon come up with a similar product, he decided to publish his idea on his own without Guidon Games. Thus, Gygax and his associates created a new company, Tactical Studies Rules, aka TSR.
See, that's the thing. The problem is, let's imagine that you and I
D&D was officially released in 1974. Often called the White Box, the very first version was released in a wood-grain box. The literal white boxes that came later have the same contents, though. These contents included 3 short 30 to 40-page booklets. One booklet for player information, one for monsters and treasures, and one for adventure building. You can see how much of an amateur company TSR was within these pages, especially in the art. The art of original D&D was the equivalent of the doodles you might find in the margins of a teenager's biology novel. Bad anatomy, needless nudity, and blatant tracing from comic book art. Specifically, tracings of Doctor Strange and Nick Fury from the 60s Strange Tales comic series. The art would improve with each of the following supplements, but it took a while for D&D products to truly look professional. Another indicator that this was still TSR's adolescent phase was the simplicity of the system itself. D&D was basically a chainmail supplement rather than a new game. The white box that contained the rules even had extra space to accommodate the chainmail booklet. As bizarre as it sounds, players needed the chainmail booklet to figure out certain D&D rules, such as initiative. D&D by itself had no rules for which player would go first, while chainmail assigned speeds to different actions, like melee attacks and ranged attacks. The D&D booklets also used the chainmail combat system, ranking different classes based on the hero and superhero tiers of power as they leveled. Fortunately, Dungeons & Dragons also offered its own combat rules for the people that didn't own chainmail. This alternative rule set would become the trademark D&D combat system, all the way until 3rd edition. It essentially involved looking up an attack table for your class, and seeing what you needed to roll in order to hit every possible armor class. When your dice roll matched an opponent's armor class, it counted as a hit, and then you rolled for damage. Later editions introduced a shortcut called THACO, an acronym for to hit armor class 0. Basically, you would write down what you needed in order to hit the maximum armor class, instead of constantly referring back to your character's attack table. After all, if you know you can hit armor class 0, it logically follows that you would be able to hit any armor class above it, like 1, 5, or 8. If you find yourself wondering, wait, is it easier to hit an AC of 0 than an AC of 8? Realize that equipping better armor back then actually gave characters a lower armor class. This seemingly inverted system meant that you had to have high attack rolls to hit low armor classes. This was not the easiest system to explain to newbies, which is why it was eventually phased out. The White Box had only 3 classes to start with. One of these was the Fighting Man, the prototype for the future fighter. The Fighting Man was a pretty self-explanatory class, since all it really did was fight. Their only class feature was access to the best weapons, armor, and attack bonuses. The Magic User was on the other end of the spectrum, being a poor fighter but having access to a wide array of versatile spells. These characters started off incredibly weak though, as they could not use armor. They also started off with only 1 spell at level 1, so their utility was strictly limited early on. Magic users that survived the first few levels would grow into the most powerful party members, so it was in the party's best interest to protect and babysit them. The Cleric was the 3rd class, and it was kind of a balance between the 2 extremes. Pretty good at fighting and magic, but excelling at neither. The Cleric as a fighter could use most of the equipment except for edged weapons, which meant no swords, spears, or even arrows. Being stuck with maces was also a big drawback in and of itself, as magic blades were the best and most commonly found magic weapons in D&D. Clerics as magic users had access to spells, but these spells functioned differently. The magic user relied on book learning for his magic, while the cleric was empowered by his faith to a divine entity. Because of this, clerics had a smaller variety of spells, and they gained them way slower, to the point that clerics had no spellcasting whatsoever at level 1. Despite the different lore and progression though, clerics and magic users subscribed to the same spell mechanics. They could only cast a certain number of prepared spells per day, based on their level. Once a spell was cast, it was forgotten until it was prepared again for the next day. This is often called Vancian magic, based on the Dying Earth novel series by Jack Vance. Oddly, despite how much other RPGs have taken from D&D's history, Vancian magic never really caught on outside of D&D. Odder still perhaps, is that it's a system that survives to this day. We should also note that clerics are more of a general support role back then, rather than the skirmishing healer they play today. They of course had healing spells, but those scaled pretty poorly and were mostly for use outside of battle. The cleric's purpose was to supplement the other classes' abilities without outshining them. There is one unique thing they excelled at, though: their ability to force undead to flee in terror. This ability would later be known as Turn Undead, and it's basically that scene in horror movies when people ward off vampires by brandishing a cross. Another reason why clerics were awful healers is that healing wasn't really a thing in older D&Ds. And that's because it was way easier to die back then. Once you hit 0 hit points, that was it. No saving throw, no negative hit points, nothing but the cold embrace of death. You also rolled for your starting health totals during character creation, so it was possible to have 1 HP at level 1. This allowed something as benign as a strong gust of wind to literally kill an adventurer. Even high stats didn't help much, since rolling high for the Constitution attribute only gave +1 health per level. And even if you think that's better than nothing, getting high Constitution was never a guarantee because you had to roll 3d6 to determine each of your attributes in order. This meant that you had to roll all your character's stats first before you could determine which class might be a good fit afterward. So, good luck playing that mage with 4 intelligence. Fortunately, stats in original D&D didn't determine as much as they do compared to future editions. Though they didn't provide a big bonus, they also weren't as big a detriment. For the most part, stats just determined how fast characters leveled in their classes. A fighting man with high strength leveled faster than one with low strength. Magic users leveled faster based on their intelligence, and clerics leveled faster based on their wisdom. Asymmetrical leveling may seem strange nowadays, but leveling differences were an important part of class balance. Consider that each of the classes didn't even have the same amount of possible levels as each other. Clerics had a max level of 8, while magic users had a max level of 11, but clerics leveled faster to make up for their class being weaker in the long run. Players could theoretically go beyond the supposed max levels, but they got fewer new toys past the ranks that were listed in the rulebook. In addition to classes, players were also given the option to make their character a human or one of 3 fantasy races. But we should note that old school D&D was very human-centric, and Tolkien races were not really allowed to deviate from their traditional portrayals due to the strict character creation rules. Elves had to feel like classic fantasy elves, and the same went for dwarves and hobbits. So no parties made up of dwarf wizards or half-orc paladins like you might get today. Non-humans could not reach the max level in any of the classes, and they were banned from most classes outright. Fighting Man was the one class everyone could reliably access, and only humans could become clerics. The fantasy races did get racial abilities to make up for these limitations, making them more powerful early on compared to their human counterparts. This echoes the old fantasy idea of humans being generally weaker than the other races, but having the most potential. Dwarves could only become fighting men, and they could only reach Fighting Man level 6. In exchange for this handicap, dwarves got higher magic resistance, the ability to detect traps, the ability to detect certain architectural constructions, and more language options. Elves, on the other hand, could dual class as fighting men and magic users. We should note that dual classing is not the same as multi-classing in modern D&D. What elves could do is essentially switch between the 2 classes in between adventures, and they could also use armor, even when playing as a magic user. Elves could only reach 4th level fighting man and 8th level magic user, but being able to cast spells in armor made it one of the stronger builds. On top of this, elves were also better at spotting secret doors than the other races, gained more language options, and were immune to the paralysis of a ghoul's touch. To put it simply, elves were awesome. Hobbits, on the other hand, sucked. They were capped at level 4 and could only be fighting men. Their sole advantage was their magic resistance, a trait that the dwarves also got, making them just shoddier, crappier dwarves. Gary Gygax claimed not to have been a fan of The Lord of the Rings, and his treatment of hobbits and the other fantasy races might be evidence of that. His disinterest in Tolkien was probably exacerbated when Tolkien's estate sent him a cease and desist letter in 1976. This letter caused TSR to change the name of numerous D&D monsters, which is why hobbits in D&D are now called halflings. That covers most of the material in the player-relevant booklet titled Men and Magic. At the end of the booklet is the spell sections. A lot of the iconic spells were present from the start, but the omissions of certain modern staples led to some widely different gameplay. For instance, magic users without Featherfall had to be more wary of heights, and clerics had to wait until level 6 to get an improvement on their first healing spell. Booklet 2 was Monsters and Treasure, and the contents are pretty self-explanatory. Monster stats in Booklet 2 were simple enough to fit on 2 large tables. Each creature was only given a short paragraph after that for any additional detail. The variety of monsters was expanded from chainmail to include ooze creatures and more mythical beasts, such as unicorns and medusas. The monster table didn't just list the stats and special abilities, but also the number of monsters that would appear during a random encounter and the type of treasure they carried. Treasure in particular was a crucial component of old-school D&D for one important reason. Acquiring it was the best way to gain experience. This may seem weird conceptually, but it made sense from a mechanical standpoint. Combat was so deadly back then that players were often incentivized to avoid it. An ideal scenario would be to swipe a monster's treasure right under its nose without having to fight it at all. Wandering monsters, aka random encounters, were the most important aspect of this idea, since they gave almost no benefit to the players. Their primary purpose was to punish players for milling around too long in hostile territory. To get any reward for killing monsters, players had to track down the creature's lair. That's where all the good stuff would be. This experience system encouraged the party to explore, rather than just assault every monster they encountered. It's also worth noting random encounters back then were not supposed to be balanced, at least not the ones on the world map. Out there, players could run into literally anything. First level characters had a chance to walk outside, unexpectedly stumble into a dragon, and then get incinerated immediately. New adventurers therefore had to play smart and evade these encounters as much as possible, which is why rules for combat evasion were detailed in the third booklet, titled The Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. This booklet detailed what would nowadays be considered Dungeon Master's Guide material for world building and running the game. Another major feature of old school D&D that helped players was morale. All non-player characters in unnerving situations had to roll for morale to see if they flee or not. Wimpier foes would surrender more easily, and only certain opponents would fight to the death against all odds. Enemies spotted in a random encounter also didn't necessarily attack on sight either, as they would be given a reaction roll to see how they responded to the party. Like we mentioned before, combat was deadly, and even NPCs weren't eager to die in a pointless fight. The morale roll traces its roots back to chainmail and other war games, where armies would regularly have to check for morale after taking massive casualties. There were also echoes of wargaming found in the scale of some encounters in original D&D. Players could face up to 300 enemies, and there could even be up to 50 players in a single game. However, you would obviously need more referees to coordinate games on this scale. But these huge numbers show the difference between heroes and monsters in original D&D versus the roles they served in later video game RPGs. Older video games were generally more restrictive due to the limited memory space for party sizes, so individual characters were made stronger to compensate. Each one felt like a hero right off the bat, and these early video games set the standard for RPG heroes going forward. But back in D&D, the players were disposable grunts in a small military unit. You were basically taking a random soldier from a chainmail game and imagining what it was like to be them in a massive battle fraught with danger. Characters had a chance to ascend to greatness, but most of them did not.
I asked her to address the first point and she didn't. That means you lose. Yeah, so you have ad hominem. Do you have any arguments? She wouldn't have
The first 2 supplements for D&D were named after the first 2 D&D campaigns, Greyhawk and Blackmore. Despite the names, though, neither supplement gave much detail to their respective campaign worlds. Instead, these books served to expand the basic rules, especially in regards to the Greyhawk supplement. Thanks to this booklet, magic users and clerics had their max level caps get doubled from the original game. Both classes got a ton of new spells to go along with this change, including some notoriously game-breaking spells, like Wish and Permanent Spell. Fighting men, on the other hand, got bupkis. On the bright side, though, the importance of stats was expanded in this booklet. Nowadays, every class gets attack bonuses from high strength and dodge bonuses from high dexterity, but only fighting men got these bonuses in the original edition, and only thanks to Greyhawk. Greyhawk also expanded the importance of intelligence, as it now limited the amount of spells a magic user could learn. So there were some attempts to keep casters in line, but overall they became much stronger. This booklet is also where classes got different health totals. Before this, the fighter and magic user both rolled d6s for health, since the white box, as well as chainmail, both used d6s for everything. But now the fighting men got a health buff to d8, while the magic users were downgraded to a d4. This is also the first version of the game, where weapons dealt different damage too. Originally, damage was dealt with, you guessed it, a d6, regardless of their type. So daggers used to be just as deadly as two-handed claymores. It's also worth noting that this is the first book to generally refer to fighting men as fighters instead, which is a huge buff for this class since fighting man is a dumb name. The D&D races also got expanded a little bit. Half-elves were introduced for the first time, and they were a somewhat better version of the elf. They got the elf bonus languages and bonuses to spotting secret doors, while also being able to progress further in the fighting and magic classes. They could even mix in up to 4 cleric levels too. The biggest addition for the fantasy races, though, was the addition of one of 2 new classes, the Thief class. Like the cleric, the Thief was another midway point between the fighter and the magic user, but it was a different style of support class. The Thief was focused around skills instead of support spells, although they started off being extremely bad at those skills. In fact, it took the Thief until level 6 to get a 50% chance in accomplishing any of its iconic abilities, like opening locks or moving silently. The Thief was a terrible fighter too, since they had as much health as the fragile magic user, and could only equip leather armor. Even sneak attacks were harder to pull off back then, since not only were they backstabs, but they had to be literal stabs in the back. So although the Thief was a pretty bad class, it was a huge boon to the fantasy races. Not only did non-humans get bonuses to Thief skills, but it was the first class to not give them a strict max level. This was especially important for the Hobbit, Halfling, don't sue, since the Thief class allowed them to finally progress past level 4. Finally, the worst race could now mainline the worst class, which, jokes aside, is at least kind of appropriate, considering that Bilbo Baggins was the burglar of his adventuring. The Paladin was the other class introduced in this supplement, and it was way more exclusionary than the Universal Thief. In fact, it was the first class to have stat requirements. Players who rolled higher on their stats could now play strictly better classes, which only served to widen the gap between players. But at least it made the existence of a Paladin in the party lineup feel like a big deal. For the Paladin, players needed to roll almost the maximum amount of charisma possible. They were also required to follow a strict code of honor that demanded they give their treasure to the poor and always perform lawful deeds. Failing to follow this code revoked the Paladin status and turned the character into a normal fighter. In exchange for following this code, Paladins could heal others a little bit and cure diseases once per day. They were immune to diseases themselves and had access to better saving throws. They were also granted a super intelligent warhorse that they could use as a mount. At higher levels, Paladins could detect and dispel evil at will. So although the requirements were steep, the indomitable strength the Paladin brought was worth the cost. The main additions from the Blackmore supplement were the Assassin and Monk classes. In a nutshell, these were both human-only variants on the Thief. The Monk had the strictest stat requirements out of any class at the time, and it became absurdly powerful at high levels. The trade-off to this was that the Monk was pathetically fragile at the start. Check out our Monk video to learn more about the Monk's legacy as arguably the worst class in D&D history. The Assassin had much less demanding stat requirements than the Monk, but it was only allowed in campaigns based on DM discretion. This class sacrificed 2 levels of their Thief skills for the ability to use instant-death poisons and almost perfect disguises. They also had more health than the Thief and could use shields, making them somewhat beefier in combat. Supplementing the Assassin was an assassination table, presumably used to determine the odds of completing an assassination mission. The table's purpose isn't really clarified, but the book describes how assassins can gain extra experience by carrying out contract killings on the side. We mention it because a low-level assassin has a 75% chance of outright killing an opponent of equal level. This percentage chance slowly dropped over time to 25%, but the class would absolutely run roughshod over opponents during the low levels for any DM foolish enough to allow it. The third D&D supplement was called Eldritch Wizardry, mostly due to the demons added in the monster section. The majority of the player section was focused on introducing the psionic rules. Fans hated this addition lore-wise, since it meant moving away from traditional fantasy and more towards science fiction, with characters possessing latent psionic abilities outside of magic. Fans also hated this because the rules were confusing and broken. Part of the reason Vancian magic became etched into D&D is probably because the alternative to that was psionics. Aside from demons and psionics, Eldritch Wizardry also introduced the Druid class of all things. The Druid idea was already introduced in Greyhawk as a possible monster opponent, but here it was made into a cleric subclass. Druids swapped out Turn Undead and the superior cleric equipment for some minor nature powers like passing through overgrowth, identifying plants, identifying animals, and identifying pure water. Yeah, druids were kind of a step down from clerics. Even their iconic shape-changing from modern editions was less impressive back then, since they couldn't turn into any creature larger than a small bear. This ability was primarily for traveling and partially healing the druid than it was for combat. The biggest upside to the class was the fact that its spell list had more elemental and nature-based magic spells sprinkled throughout the usual cleric spell list. However, the cleric list remained the better choice of the two, especially if you wanted the best healing and resurrection spells in the game. Not to mention reaching the most powerful abilities meant that the druid would have to rank up in the druid hierarchy. That may sound appealing, but only a certain number of high-level druids could exist in the world at any point. This notion was also true for monks as well. Eventually, the only way for these classes to level up was to get promoted in the organization they were a part of. And getting promoted usually meant challenging a superior member in combat. Losing the fight effectively de-leveled the character, forcing them to regain experience points until they could try again. After Eldritch Wizardry, there were only 2 more supplements for original D&D. The last one actually labeled the D&D supplement was Gods, Demigods, and Heroes. This booklet provided stats for characters from mythology, presumably so players could go fight them. Swords and Spells was not technically labeled as a D&D supplement, but it was essentially the replacement for Chainmail. Swords and Spells not only supplied more detailed mass combat rules than Chainmail, but also added more D&D creatures, spells, and items. So fittingly, original D&D began and ended with, well, wargaming supplements. Those were the last published books, but some more important additions were made in the magazine called The Strategic Review. The Strategic Review was a super short-lived publication created by TSR in 1975. The magazine aimed to discuss Dungeons & Dragons and miniature wargaming as a whole. Additionally, it clarified rules, hyped new products, and offered variant rule sets. These variant rules included many iconic D&D monsters, such as the Mind Flayer and the Roper. They also introduced 3 new classes. The first new class was the Ranger, which was basically a variation on the Paladin. The Ranger had more spread out stat requirements than the Paladin, but it demanded the same strict ethical code. The major benefits of this class was the ability to track monsters and gain damage bonuses against giants. The Ranger also got access to both magic user and cleric spell lists, though Rangers couldn't learn spells higher than level 3. The second class added through the Strategic Review was the Illusionist, a variant on the magic user with high intelligence and dexterity requirements. The class could only go up to level 13, but that was around the point most campaigns ended anyway. Illusionists sacrificed access to magic item variety and spell variety in exchange for a unique magic list focused more on illusions. Some of these spells were pretty powerful and flavorful, such as the ability to turn deceased characters into specters, or the ability to summon shadow reflections of real monsters. One spell, dubbed Shadow Magic, could partially replicate the effects of various offensive magic user abilities, such as Lightning Bolt and Wall of Fire. Shadow Magic could also perfectly replicate the effects of those spells if the victim believed the illusionist was actually casting the mimicked magic. Spells like this led to the Illusionist becoming the hardest class to adjudicate for Dungeon Masters. The Illusionist and Illusion Magic as a whole could become broken strong if the Dungeon Master didn't make sufficiently skeptical NPCs. The third class added through the Strategic Review was the Bard. The Bard was essentially a mix of different Bard concepts from history, from Celtic Druids to French minstrels. This mishmash ultimately led to a jack-of-all-trades concept. Bards could equip any weapon and use chainmail armor, making them sturdier than the Thief in combat. Speaking of the Thief, Bards also got access to Thief skills at 1/2 the effectiveness, and unlike Thieves, Bards got access to magic user spells up to level 7. This was all on top of their Bard features. Bardic lore, for instance, gave them a % chance to know information on almost anything. Bards could also replicate other magical effects using music. Bards at high levels got access to a confusion song, a fear song, and a minor healing song. Not only that, but bards could deploy a charm person effect with their music too. This effect was based on a % chance derived from the bard's level, and the level of the opponent he was attempting to charm. The mechanics and penalties involved with this effect alone are longer than the descriptions of most classes from this era. The bard as a whole was probably the strongest and most complicated class available in original D&D, which is probably why this was the only strategic review class to not become a base class when Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was released. It was instead added to the appendix, and reworked into something players would have to earn over time by playing a fighter-thief-druid hybrid. The strategic review was eventually cancelled after only 7 issues in 1976. It was replaced with a new magazine called Dragon, that focused exclusively on role-playing games. TSR tried to keep its wargaming articles alive with another short-lived magazine called Little Wars, but it became clear that D&D was the company's biggest asset by a mile. Technically, some of the early Dragon articles count as original D&D, since Advanced D&D was just starting to come out around this time. But none of these niche, last-minute editions were impactful enough to make it into the Advanced Edition or a lot of later editions. The release of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons around 1977 concluded the era of original D&D. There was some transitioning involved, but AD&D is what is considered nowadays to be First Edition, with original D&D being Edition 0. And so ends our history review on Dungeons & Dragons, or First Edition. No, Edition 0, the white box that was made of wood, or whatever name you'd prefer.
Panpsyism isn't the word, panpsyism.
So is it worth it for newer players to try out the white box? We should first start by saying no two groups played the original game the exact same way. The fact that certain elements were clarified only in chainmail, and that some rules were too general and loose, and variant rule sets were commonly sprinkled throughout original D&D's history, made it less structured than modern systems. This is a flaw for those looking for concise and clear rules to play streamlined games. But on the bright side, the nature of this flaw stemmed from the fact that this system is, well, simple by modern standards. It didn't take hours to make characters or run combat scenarios back then. Proficiencies, feats, and skills didn't exist yet. Combat basically boiled down to moving, attacking, and throwing out the occasional spell. Certain monsters would mix up this format a bit, but even those would have only 1 or 2 special abilities to worry about. The downside to this simplicity is that the rules were so simple that you often found yourself begging for more detail at times. Original D&D is probably profoundly confusing for someone not familiar with D&D terms, mechanics, and conventions. These booklets aren't really teaching tools, and their arrangement was often haphazard. It was very easy to overlook a rule, especially since that rule would likely only be mentioned once and not always in the most obvious place. The fact that these books are so small prevented this from being a crippling flaw, but nevertheless, you still needed a somewhat experienced player at the table to explain how the game flowed. If you think that's just our opinion, we should note that this was the exact reason why Basic Dungeons & Dragons was created relatively soon afterwards in 1977. The whole intention of that system was to teach beginners as they played. Basic D&D might be a better option for complete newbies, but it is a different system that simplifies many elements from the original game. Newbies who want a more authentic white box experience might want to try Retroclone instead. Retroclones are tabletop games from other companies that recreate the older D&D editions. A lot of the rights to the D&D rules got loosened after Wizards of the Coast got the license, so a lot of these games are completely free to play. Though there are legal stipulations involved for creating these systems, so don't think that these old rules are public domain or anything. For example, Retroclones aren't allowed to use certain iconic D&D trademarks, or even the name Dungeons & Dragons. The biggest and most faithful Retroclone for original D&D is probably Swords and Wizardry by Frog God Games. This system helps codify the rule set in a manner closer to modern RPGs. Thankfully, there are many options for newer players curious about the original game. Some of those might be better options than the actual white box itself, but the white box did set the stage for AD&D, Basic, and future Retroclones. It's a testament to original D&D's strength that many of its rules stuck around for decades, even if it could have been clearer in its elucidation.
What is the reason or the argument for your position? What is the position? What is the argument? What's the logical
Thank you for watching DM It All. If you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your fellow adventurers, and subscribe to our channel for future content. Also, comment down below with your thoughts. Did you ever play original D&D? If you didn't, would you consider running it, basic, or a retro clone? And would you like to see more of these retrospectives for other D&D systems? Thanks again, and we'll see you all next session.
It's amazing, isn't it, how many people just literally don't even know what it means to give an account for the position. Especially the boomer crowd, they just love to it's like a machine gun. Just vomit and assertion. Vomit, assertion. Okay, why should I believe that? Another vomit of assertion.
depths of the lunar night, which is far colder than even Antarctica's coldest winter, and up to 243 degrees above zero at lunar midday, which is hotter than boiling water. NASA claims their special suits are fitted with both heating and cooling systems, but nothing which could withstand these incredible temperatures. These suits are also supposedly pressurized to keep the vacuum non-pressure of space from bursting their blood vessels, but they clearly have deep creases and wrinkles all over. Astronauts in true pressurized suits would look like the Michelin Man bubbling out. Also, the amount of radiation in space, especially through the Van Allen belt, is far too intense for them to be spacewalking in such flimsy suits. One Russian study found that the amount of radiation present on the moon would require astronauts to be clothed in 4 feet of lead in order to avoid instant death. John Malden, a NASA physicist, said they would need at least 2 meters of thick shielding around them at all times, yet there they are, bouncing around the moon in their 2-inch thin suits. Another solid proof of NASA living up to its forked serpent tongue logo are the many supposed moon rocks given to museums the world over by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Shortly after Apollo 11, private investigator Paul Jacobs reported asking the U.S. Department of Geology head whether he had examined the moon rocks and if he could verify their authenticity, to which the geologist simply laughed and insinuated that people high in the U.S. government knew all about the cover-up. More recently, in 2009, curators at Amsterdam's Rijksmuseum investigated their moon rock, personally given to them by Armstrong and Aldrin in 1969, only to find that it was actually a worthless piece of petrified wood. Bill Kaysing, another moon hoax researcher, worked at Rocketdyne, where NASA Saturn V rocket engines were built, and became exposed to documents pertaining to the Mercury, Gemini, Atlas, and Apollo NASA programs, which proved trickery was afoot. Kaysing said of the documents that one does not need an engineering or science degree to determine that a hoax was being perpetrated. He wrote a book about his findings called We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 billion swindle. In it, he exposes how NASA staged both the Apollo 1 fire and Challenger accident, deliberately murdering the astronauts on board to silence them. Before the first Apollo mission ever even cleared the launch pad, 11 NASA astronauts died in highly suspicious accidents. Gus Grissom, Roger Chaffee, and Ed White were all cremated together in an Apollo capsule fire during a completely unnecessary and dangerous test where they were strapped down and locked into a 100% oxygen chamber, which incinerated the 3 of them to death in seconds. 7 other astronauts, Ted Freeman, Charles Bassett, Elliot See., Russell Rogers, Clifton Williams, Michael Adams, and Robert Lawrence, died in 6 separate airplane crashes, and Ed Gibbons in a car crash. 8 of these deaths were in 1967 alone. So many astronauts coincidentally dying under such circumstances is highly unlikely and lends credence to the idea that these were intentional hits by the Masons trying to find the right people to sell their hoax. One of the most outspoken of the fallen astronauts was Gus Grissom. By 1967, Grissom had become increasingly irritated and vocally negative about NASA's chances of ever landing on the moon. He stated the odds were pretty slim and famously hung a lemon on the Apollo capsule after it repeatedly failed safety testing procedures. Grissom threatened to go public with his complaints about the LEM and even told his wife Betty, if there ever is a serious accident in the space program, it's likely to be me. Right after his murder, government agents raided Grissom's house before anyone had been informed about the fire or his death. They removed all his personal papers and his diary, never to be returned. Ralph Renee writes, in a prosecutorial mode, I accuse NASA, the CIA, and whatever super-secret group that controls the shadow government of these United States of fraud on the grandest scale imaginable, of murder by arson, and of larceny of over $40 billion in conjunction with the Apollo program that allegedly landed men on the moon. I also accuse them of violating a federal law against lobbying by government-funded entities and of serial murder of low-level NASA employees, witnesses, and other citizens who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Such accusations seem incredible because none of us ever want to believe our governmental father is deceiving us. However, by the end of this book, even the most trusting reader will have no doubt that NASA mooned America. In 2001, investigative journalist and award-winning filmmaker Bart Sibrel produced the excellent documentary A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. When requesting footage for his movie, Sibrel was sent either by mistake or by a well-meaning whistleblower an official raw-slated NASA clip from the Apollo 11 mission showing a young Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins for almost an hour using transparencies and camera tricks to fake shots of around Earth. They communicate over audio with control in Houston about how to accurately stage the shot, and someone keeps prompting them on how to effectively manipulate the camera to achieve the desired effect. First, they blacked out all the windows, except for a downward-facing circular one, which they aimed the camera towards from several feet away. This created the illusion of a ball-shaped Earth surrounded by the blackness of space, when in fact it was simply a round window in their dark cabin. Neil Armstrong, claimed at this point to be 130,000 miles comes under computer control, then landed in. Martian gravity, about 0.37 that of Earth. Gravity accelerates an object at 32 feet per second. This gives Mars the ability to accelerate an object at 11.84 feet per second. The 560 miles an hour horizontal motion will not affect the downward velocity of an object that falls 781,000 feet on Mars. The terminal velocity at the time the chute was deployed was about 4,300 feet per second, which is almost 3,000 miles per hour. That's much faster than a speeding bullet. NASA claims that in a matter of 14,400 feet, that chute, operating under near vacuum conditions, reduced the lander's speed to 145 miles per hour. Sure it did. That was then. Let's look at now. The next probe to land on Mars did so on July 4th, 1997. NASA tells us that the Pathfinder came in at 16,600 miles per hour and was then jettisoned to boldly plunge into the fringes of the Martian atmosphere without using retro rockets to enter orbit. As usual, there were two different histories given by NASA. The first states that by some miracle during the next minute its speed was reduced to 1,000 miles per hour. The second states that it was jettisoned at 5,300 miles and its speed was reduced in 30 minutes while it fell to 80 miles. In the first case, the deceleration would have been incredible. However, in the second case, the Pathfinder would be at the 80-mile high place, still doing 4,280 miles per hour. The NASA story gets murky, but it is assumed the Pathfinder was again allowed to free fall until it was 7 miles high when NASA claims the parachute opened. Instead of streaming because it had been popped in almost a vacuum, it billowed forth and slowed the Pathfinder down. When it was 1 mile up, it dropped the chute, blew up the airbag, and fired retro rockets, reducing its speed to 23 miles per hour. Then the airbag hit the ground and bounced either 3 times or 16 times, depending on which official NASA story you believe. MX News on June 3rd, 2008, featured a picture given to them by NASA of the Phoenix's first dig into Martian soil. But on June 6th, 2008, 3 days later, the London Daily Telegraph reported from NASA that another communications glitch stopped NASA's Phoenix lander from making its first dig into Martian soil. How could they give the photo to MX News if they had yet to make their first dig? And why can they never keep their stories straight? Then, Mars Phoenix lander's robotic arm photographed image 89662759, taken at 143937 LST, and image 896662868 at 144123 LST, only 2 minutes and 46 seconds later. In the first image, there is a fallen loose screw visible by the leg, which disappears before the second photo is taken. NASA themselves claimed the robot arm did not touch Martian soil until the next day, so they cannot claim to have moved it themselves, and the topical arrangement of sand and rocks remains exactly the same, so it cannot be explained by strong winds. Thus the question remains, who picked up the screw? More than likely an observant and well-meaning stagehand picked it up between shots. Jera White, a diligent Mars hoax researcher, also noticed that the Columbia commemorative plaque attached to the Spirit rover on Mars photos and videos is not the same one pictured on Earth seconds before launch. This is blatant proof that photo trickery is going on with these Mars missions. Several photography experts have even mentioned how Mars looks exactly like Arizona or parts of the Australian outback desert, and it appears NASA simply added a red tint to the atmosphere in post-production. By using the Auto Levels tool in Photoshop, even NASA Mars photographs lose their red tint, however, and look exactly like the Earth. Adolf Hitler said, "In the big lie there is always a certain force of credibility, because the broad masses of a nation are always more easily corrupted in the deeper strata of their emotional nature than consciously or voluntarily, and thus in the primitive simplicity of their minds they more readily fall victims to the big lie than the small lie, since they themselves often tell small lies in little matters, but would be ashamed to resort to large-scale falsehoods. It would never come into their heads to fabricate colossal untruths, and they would not believe that others could have the impudence to distort the truth. grossly impudent lie always leaves traces behind it, even after it has been nailed down, a fact which is known to all expert liars in this world, and to all who conspire together in the art of lying. And Ralph Renee says, since 1973, over 1 billion children all over the world have grown into adults. They've been taught to believe in the fairy tale that we landed men on the moon. I hope this book will one day banish forever this fanciful tale and relegate the story of NASA's moon and Mars landings to the realm of fraud where they belong. So there you go. You still think NASA went to the moon? If you still believe that, you're ridiculous. Okay? You're just ridiculous. If you sat through this whole thing, you watched the video evidence, you saw all the pictures, you heard all the proof, fake moon rocks, faces and pyramids on Mars, the astronauts punching people, 11 accidental astronaut deaths, all the photo anomalies. You still gonna read the NASA press release next week about we found water on Mars? Dirt. You gonna believe that? What about the Rosetta Comet landing? We landed on an asteroid. Here's some CGI. And everyone believes it.
Oh, it's a bad thing. Oh my god, they landed on an asteroid.
Are you starting to realize how gullible we've all been here? Look at the videos and pictures they show you of the planets. Find me one real image of Jupiter or Saturn or Mars from NASA. Look at them. Those are not photographs. There's no photographs. NASA doesn't do photographs. NASA does Photoshop. There's no telescopes flying around out there taking pictures of shit. It's just a bunch of Freemasons with Photoshop. Look at their rocket launches. The rockets don't even go straight up. They just come right back down. Most of them just explode. You know how many of their rocket launches fail? They have no idea what they're doing. They want you to think that they went to the moon and back over and over again 45 years ago and then never go back again. That makes a lot of sense. Look at all those pictures again. It's fake. It's so fake. Just admit it to yourself.
On the ways of the world and all this, like none of that had any it didn't grant any advantage to whether or not the argument was fallacious, whether or not what was being argued was true or false.
They do act worse. So it may.
So it's like the constant frustration that I experience is that we're talking about stuff that are. Imagine we're mechanics, and we know everything about the structure and makeup of a car. We know all the parts, how they go together, this thing over here, this runs this thing, this lubricates this other thing to make this thing go, and it's just like a super complex, mobile computer that rolls down the road, and we know all about it, right? And so everybody else rides in cars and drives cars, but they don't know anything about the inner workings of the car, right? So when somebody says, let's have a discussion of cars, by the car, I don't mean this in some arrogant way, like the car is God and I know everything about God. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the domain of laws of thought and argumentation and debate. That's what I'm talking about. In metaphysics and philosophy, the basics of philosophy, right? The car's philosophy is not knowing everything about God for you hiding goons and so everybody else is like driving around in the car, and they don't care about the inner workings of the car, right? And so when we go to talk to these people about cars, and I say, tell me what you think of the workings of a car, what do most people say? Oh yeah, dude, you're talking about my Bugatti, and it run fast. Put oil in, put gas in, it go quick. And that's what people are thinking. Cool car, bro, fast. Honda Civic, Toyota Corolla. And I'm thinking, engine, ignition, part, all this guy. Like, that's what I'm thinking of when I think of cars. So when we have this conversation, I say, yes, and I don't know shit about cars, so I'm trying to make this analogy work. Well, I don't know anything about cars. Yes, my friend, what do you think of the drive shaft and its components, and the way that they connect to the ignition? Car go fast, right? They don't know what you're talking about. The heck's a drive shaft? I don't know. Shaft. Right? Well, I don't know what a drive shaft is. Car go fast. Car look cool. Car get shit. Right? That's what most people are thinking about cars. They're not thinking about the workings and the components. Right? And it's like most people. Imagine, well, the car works because you could just put liquid inside of it and it go. So any liquid can go in, or are there rules to what liquids you can put in the car to make it go? It's the same with argumentation, with logic, with epistemology. You can't just say anything and make argument go. But people can't get this. It's just like, it's two different languages. When I say car, I'm thinking of the drive shaft and all these different parts, components, and this thing ignites and causes a chemical reaction, and that runs this thing, and this goes to this part, and everyone else is just thinking, car go fast. Okay, so fine, car go fast, but there's rules to car go fast. Like, you can't just put bug juice, right? You can't put Purplesaurus Rex in the gas tank and it runs. Right? You can't just push accelerator and it go through walls. No, it doesn't go. That thing doesn't go through walls. There's rules about it. There's things that govern the logic of that car. It doesn't go through walls. I mean, you can try to go through a wall, but car no go fast when you go through walls. But no one thinks of the laws of thought and argumentation this way. But they're the same. There's rules to it. And everybody already kind of knows this, because if I were to, imagine I were having a conversation, or you've all experienced this with relatives. You're at the Thanksgiving turkey dinner, and you're violating all the rules of propriety and wisdom, and arguing with your pervert uncle about whether or not there's conspiracies. You think 9/11 is an inside job? Oh, to take your ass to the strip club and set you straight, boy, you dumb. Right? Does your uncle know the laws of argumentation and logic? Of course not. But what does he say? Your uncle, drunk uncle says, 9/11 ain't an inside job, because that don't feel right to me. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But how it feels to you, Uncle Jimmy, don't mean nothing. Doesn't mean squat, dude. It's a dumb argument. If you tell Uncle Jimmy that's a dumb argument, he's gonna set his Doral cigarette down, and he's gonna set his Michelob Light down. And he's gonna take that mason ring and give you a nice little indentation across your jaw. It's a Thanksgiving brawl. Don't argue with your drunk uncle. But drunk uncle is a great example of like what types of fallacies most people are gonna churn out, right? 9/11 ain't an inside job because it's all them crazy towel-headed people, right? That's not an argument. That's phrase. What if and then I turn around to drunk uncle and I say, drunk uncle, your arguments are false because your door rails suck. My door rails don't suck. I've been smoking this since I was 16. Only got emphysema and cancer 4 times. What are you talking about? He would see, even he would know that's a bad argument. So everyone knows deep down, even drunk uncle knows deep down, Uncle Jimmy, he knows there's bad arguments. And yet, even though we all kind of know this and sense it deep down, it's kind of obvious. Everyone just acts as if there are no laws of thought, there are no laws of logic, there's no laws of argumentation, there's no rules to any of this, it's all just arbitrary, it's all made up. And debating is just a demonstration of will to power. It's just power dynamics and being flashy and being silver-tongued and saying quick things and shutting people down. That's like destiny debate, right? Talking fast, that kind of thing. Which Ben Shapiro does that too. But Ben Shapiro can actually kind of debate, it seems like. He's kind of an actual sort of debater. I mean, again, I've not watched a lot of Ben Shapiro. I've seen the viral clips everybody has seen of this or that owning of the lib, from 5 or 6 years ago or whatever. But he's actually making a good argument for it.
Divinity raises the humanity of Christ through theosis, and that's exactly what we experience as well.
Hello, Nick. How are you? Good. Good. Oh. So, I have so much to talk to you about. We have limited time. I guess we should get the Jews out of the way, because I agree with you on pretty much everything, but I'm a Jewophile. Zionist, love them. Is that like churn in your gut when I say that?
No,
I
really.
love Jews.
Okay, that's
Who was that guy? Cody Derbyshire? I haven't checked in on Chestnut Couch Face. What the fuck's his name?
I don't know.
He's a groyper. He tried to get on this network. Cody Chestnut?
Cody Chestnut?
What's his?
Oh, Pine Sap. Is that who?
No, not that. No. This is long ago. He had his own show, and I think it was with you. I think you guys had a falling out. I'm starting out a show with the guy.
James Alsop?
No, it's a really weird name.
Oh.
Like Crispy Chester Buttons.
I don't know any Crispy.
Fuck. Look that up, Sean. I don't know what to look up. But anyway, I would say like I'm a Zionist and stuff, and I could see him go, because I was on his show a couple of times. I guess just to sort of start at the end, and then we'll go do all the fun stuff later. Let's get some thumbnails too. The biggest thing I want you guys to know is that the Jews are not a monolith. And we've had this argument before.
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, well, I feel like there's a kinship there. And there absolutely is not. Like, my family is kind of Catholic, Irish, Scottish, and they fucking hate the English. And the fact that I was born in England was just like, it was like I was gay or retarded. Like, they still love me, but there's this horrible thing that happened. And there's no reverence, there's no like, well, if it came down to it, like, for example, when the Scots, when the English were playing soccer against Spain, if you're in Wales, all the Scots are cheering every time Spain gets a goal. The Welsh are kind of freaked out by that. They're sort of split on the English thing. But like, they want England to suffer. And that's how Orthodox and Hasidic and even secular Jewish conservatives feel about these 8.
What's up? So what was the, I don't understand. What is this whole argument about?
Yeah, so is materialism true? That's what Marxism is based on, and we want to hear the arguments.
Yeah, why is subjectivity regarding this privileged side of like consciousness or of like ontology? Why do you think that is? Because that's not what materialism is. That's what I'm arguing against.
Well, I'm arguing against what I thought was his position in terms of Leninism that Lenin outlines in Chapter 4 of Materialism and Empirical Criticism.
Well, I'm talking about like materialism as a metaphysical concept. Like, yeah,
right, yeah.
I'm not talking about Lenin.
Well, but the original debate, the guy that was in here was arguing Lenin's position. So that's what I'm concerned with, is that why are we supposed to believe that that is true?
Believe what? What did Lenin say? What's the quote?
Just that basic Chapter 4 is about there is objective truth. It's not pure subjectivity, but that objective truth is just objective matter and sensation.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, but why is that true? How are we supposed to know
I think you're getting it misconstrued with this kind of vulgar materialism. It's like something.
No, I'm reading Chapter 4.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm explaining. I'm saying. I think you take that quote. You're saying, okay, what is it out there? I can't feel it. I can't touch it. It's like.
No, I want to know the argument for why materialism is true.
Because the subject is not the privileged side of ontology of being. So subjectivity is not the.
How does that prove materialism?
Because that means the world acts upon us. It means the world is real. It means the world is material.
How does it prove that?
Because you are being acted upon. When you are born into the world, you are a finite being. You are a finite being.
How does that answer something like Sellers is the problem myth of the given?
Explain that.
Well, wait a minute. You're the philosopher, so you don't know.
I didn't say I was a philosopher.
No, you're the philosopher here explaining materialism to us, so surely you would be familiar with the major objections to materialism.
What is that objection? Lay it out. If you're the smart guy, condense it. Say it to me.
But I'm not the materialist. I thought you, so you don't know the major objections to your position.
Well, offer one forward. You're not giving me. You're not presenting your case. Like I've made mine.
The myth of the given is the idea that the external data that comes in, that there's a correspondence, or that there's a givenness or a pattern that exists, that the information that comes in matches up to the ideas in your head.
Yeah, but that necessarily can't be true. Like an unconscious person can still be given information and they're not able to disclose that information in their head. Like someone who doesn't have, like someone who hasn't
understanding the argument.
Someone who hasn't learned language.
You're not even understanding the argument.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Okay, what am I not understanding about it?
It's an argument against materialism, because materialism operates on the assumption of the myth of the given, that the data that comes in is meaningful.
Yeah, it's just Kantian jibber jabber. I know what that means. But I'm saying
not Kantian.
It literally is. It's like
no,
just
it's not.
Yes, it is.
Sellers is an empiricist. He's not a Kantian.
And what do you? Kant literally used a lot of Hume when he was making his arguments. Kant didn't fully reject Hume.
I make transitive arguments. I know.
Okay. So my point is being that, and it can be interpreted as the Kantian negation of what is being said. I understand that your mind plays tricks on you. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's part of it, but the argument is that there's an assumed correspondence between the idea that's produced from the sensations and the meaningful content in the external world. And how do you know that that's
So what we're going to do now, guys, is we're going to watch some
because of vibes, man.
scary skeletons. I haven't got that
you
many.
Because of vibes.
Because of
vibes.
The first video we have
jump into and just
front
say
row
that
at NASA
I don't know if you have
by
some
Mr.
type of-
Manticore.
if
Subscribe
you're
to Mr.
responding
Manticore.
to some type
You
of
already know this.
phenomenalism.
You're invited to the front row at
The
NASA.
fact of the matter is what you're saying about subjectivity of consciousness certainly doesn't prove materialism because
We invite you to the front row. Right, hang on a sec. This
all
is like
we can
modern
do
times
is doing
right now.
philosophy
That's a
that
phone,
believes
right?
in the material entities and real essentialism is being immaterial properties.
Do not inform others.
Yeah,
act
because
upon.
of vibes. Did you not hear the
Invitation then are
concluding argument was because of vibes?
See you soon in the front row at NASA.
Walter.
I'll see you soon, Walter.
Produce a wormhole right here in front of me.
This is the chair that I'll be bringing
I think the sheriff has been taking on camping trips every year with my dad throughout the U.S. So excited.
Explicate this here, and I'm certainly not a quantum physicist, and I presume that you're not. One of the benefits of studying at Oxford is that one of my good friends who I went for coffee with the other day, who just received his master's in physics with the best grade in the whole university, and I was able to talk to him for a very long time about quantum mechanics.
Oh, my friend. I don't have direct empirical evidence as an empiricist, as a skeptic. No, but I talked to my friend who has a master's, and he's got very good grades. These people are different. This is why it was absolutely excellent when Chris called out Matt Dillon
fucking
for this
rocket
exact
ship,
same
man.
BS.
That is literally
Look,
a death warrant.
I know a lot of guys, okay? I got a lot of big brothers. They've studied this stuff for a long time. I know some dudes, man, okay? And they know some stuff, and they also know some people who know some stuff. So, you want to bring this at me? I know some people. I talked to a friend of mine who studied quantum physics. We had coffee. We talked for a couple hours, for a long time about the law. We talked for a long time. So I learned a lot in that 2-hour coffee shop talk about quantum physics. And he says, he's from Oxford. He says that this paper in 2015 debunked the 1965 paper. Now, I don't know anything about this from empirical data, but my friend said that.
Just blew my mind by showing me exactly how to hold on to the principle of sufficient reason is what undermines current scientific understanding.
Your coffee shop conversation and your friend blowing your mind has nothing to do with the debate. Literally has no place in a debate. Is this what they teach people at, where's he at, Oxford, Cambridge? I thought Oxford was the hallowed halls of the greatest debaters of all time. This, what they're putting out, this is the best and the brightest of Oxford, is a person who makes an appeal to his coffee shop bro. Can you imagine if I was in a debate with an atheist and I said, look, I don't know about science, okay, but I believe in creation because I have a friend and we went to school, bro, and like we went to coffee after a Bible study, and like he took all these science classes, and like he said, like he got A's, okay, he got A's, and he said that like the Bible has science, okay, and he's studied, dude, like he has a lot of books in his library. Could you imagine if I brought that to a debate?
Situation in which you actually need to kill an animal in order to survive, that suffering becomes necessary and you're justified in inflicting.
Yeah, but do you see how ambiguous this is? A philosophical noob, right, who doesn't understand that the idea of what's justified or what's needed at the time and all their situation is ethics. You can justify anything, right? Oh, well, I'm setting up my empire on my special little St. James Island. I need a trove of a harem of sex slaves. And I need those sex slaves to set up my empire. So I need it in this time, in this moment, at this specific situation. I need that. It's needed, bro.
Inflicting it. There's not a situation.
By the way, I talked to a guy at a coffee shop who has read a lot, dude, and he said that there's really good arguments for setting up your harem sex cult on an island. Trust me, dude, there's a lot of good arguments for that. And because I talked to a guy for about 2 hours over coffee over that.
If you were in a situation where the only way for you to survive would be to kill another human being, I think that you're probably justified in doing that, and it would be a form of self-defense, right? So I do think that the analyses would be the same. I think that perhaps we would, I can see from your facial expression.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm really convinced that my genetic lineage is super superior. Like, it's better than everybody's, right? Like, it's going to be really solid in the future world where we have a lot of debates, and there's a lot of vaporwave children out there in the future. And so when I create my sex, I really need the harem to set up my sex cult just to procreate and repopulate the earth, right? I have the Moonraker option ready. That's my paradigm, the Moonraker option. I want to depopulate the earth, and I want to reseed the earth as the new Adam with all of my descendants in a harem of superhogs. And I've chosen as the best method to achieve that, creating a sex cult on a island in the Virgin Islands. and that sex cult is going to repopulate the earth with the best seed possible. And that's the best for all of you guys out there too. Don't you understand? I just want the best for you. And the best thing for you guys is to let me and my empire have the world. Don't you guys see that that's what's best for all of us, especially me? And look, that's what I need to do right now. I need it, man. Bro, I need this. I need this. I need this, Cosmic. We will be eating animals, Cosmic. I'm sorry. Because I like animals. And I'm going to reduce animal suffering by eating them all. Right? Because the more of them that I eat, when they cease to exist, they don't suffer anymore. So I'm reducing the animal suffering by eating them. Explain how there's not at all. I've heard a lot of ethical posturing, moral high ground posturing, which the atheists love this. Have you noticed that the atheists, kind of like Pharisees, even though Pharisees were religious, you notice the atheists love to tout their higher morals? Bro, we all know atheists are a bunch of cooners, dude. Like, we know you. We don't think you have higher morals. You're not fooling anybody with this moral posturing. You have higher. So sophisticated, so humane, so tolerant. Again, what did democide do in the 20th century? The atheist regimes was the most deadly thing in the 20th century. Democide via atheist governments. Sorry, that's not very humane, is it? No. This whole position is totally arbitrary, totally ad hoc, and I really wish, I'm hoping, I think the cross-examination is coming out, I hope that Trent calls him out on this. I hope Trent blows that horn, calls him out. Put that cheesecake down, Trent. Put that cheesecake down, now. Blow that horn and call him out.
But I also want people to know that the cross-examiner is allowed to interrupt and move the flow of the argument as...
Remember when I was allowed to interrupt Dr. Shabir Ali? And then when we nailed him in the cross-examination, when he melted down, and all the Muslims, you're not allowed to talk! You're not... Why you interrupt? Bro, it said at the beginning of the debate, you can interrupt. What are you talking about? We already know where this goofy thing's going down.
In Voltaire's novel Candide, there is a shipwreck in which...
If I just present the problem of evil for the 5,000th time.
Candide and Pangloss and their friend Jacques are shipwrecked in the harbour of...
Has nobody surpassed Reddit tier stuff? Like, even at this PhD level? This is Reddit tier stuff. I mean...
But does anyone here really want to claim that evil does not exist? So I don't think we've heard any good reason to think that God does not exist. Indeed, the theist is not committed to Leibniz's claim that the...
Actually, don't a lot of atheists believe that evil does not actually exist? So that was a weird... Dr. Craig, that was the... Why do we keep appealing to... Does anybody really want to see this? Don't we all agree on this? Does anybody... Don't we all believe that there's some kind of... Nobody really wants to deny there's... These are all fallacies. I'm just appealing to... But you can use that for a rhetorical device in a debate, but that's up to another term.
This is the...
if you could have God grow some new limbs of amputees of soldiers in the Iraq War, Christian soldiers with Christian families, praying for them to be healed, I would seriously consider that and changing my mind. So far, this has not happened, not even once.
My response to this is, first of all, this comes up in Jesus' ministry, right? So there's a point where the Pharisees say, if you are who you say you are, then do what we say, and then we'll believe in you. If you do the miracles that we come up with, maybe, float around or something, right? And Jesus says, no, actually, you won't believe, right? And then he gives the story of Abraham's bosom, right? And so the guy dies and he goes to Abraham's bosom and he says, Lord, I'm here in this horrible place. Let me go back and tell my brethren about afterlife, because then they'll believe. And what does Jesus say? Does he say, oh yes, if we could just present enough evidence of resurrections, if we could just pile up enough evidentiary proofs, evidentiary data, then maybe they'll believe. No, Jesus says, if they don't believe Moses and the prophets, neither will they believe if someone rise from the dead. I'll tell you what, meachew, if you produce a wormhole that I can step through and become a sci-fi god, then I'll believe in science. Produce a wormhole right here in front of me that's pink and swirling and sparkly, and I will believe in science. Man, I feel sorry for people. I mean, can you imagine falling for this speech? This is such bullshit, dude. This is such a sales pitch. Like, you can't see through this. This is ridiculous. Like, wow, if the atheist worldview is true, all the shit he's saying is totally meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. It's nothing. Remember the vegan atheist from a few months ago who literally had said that there's nothing wrong with fallacies. You can commit any informal fallacy you want in a debate, and you can still win. What? I mean, it's so dumb and so absurd that it doesn't even deserve a response. Everybody wants to play this game of like, who can tally up the most number of scientists on their side. Like, oh yeah, atheists? Well, my cousin knows a dude who's a biologist, and he's a theist. Boom. So what? It wouldn't matter if every scientist in the world was an atheist. Literally.
Richard Dawkins, please, to the ring.
Well, of course, I'm over here. I'm just trying to suck the last drip of blood from the baby bottle.
My colleague, Peter Atkins, whose works I recommend to you, I think that it's high time that a science...
I am a vampire. I just wanted to suckle the last drop of life from the baby bottle I suckled before this conference, which was filled with baby's blood.
Scientist won a Nobel Prize for Literature.
I was doing a seance and calling upon my mentor and my patron, Lord Vlad the Impaler, and he gave me some good scientific arguments before the debate.
And Peter Atkins would be my nominee for that. He was once invited to give a lecture in Windsor Castle, which, as you know, is one of the homes of the British monarch. And at the end of...
We have some wonderful, delightful, delectable rituals underneath Windsor Castle. Yes, my lord. Windsor Castle. You must all come visit sometime. On the winter solstice, perhaps. We shall find you there. Look for me in a purple robe.
We humans are obsessed with purpose. It seems perfectly natural when we're presented with an object to say, what's it for? It starts in childhood. The psychologist Deborah Kellerman has investigated this very interestingly with children, offering them a question like, what...
Yes, I love stories of children.
Something as complicated as a heart, even a brain. Who would have thought that by the laws of physics, unaided, unviolated, just filtered through this brilliant process of natural selection, evolution by natural selection, that the blind laws of physics could produce the illusion of design.
This is another move that you hear these people make, which is they'll do this thing where they say, centuries ago we thought that Bishop Butler argued for design and the complexity of life required that there be some highly intelligent designer. We now know. 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 We now know just sort of fly past any actual proof of the we now know, and you just say, we now know. This constitutes an argument, apparently, right? You just say, we now know, right? We used to believe that God exists. We now know that he doesn't. Case closed. It's over, dude. Boom, debate over. We now know. Oh, we now know. We now know. It says who? What? And by the way, the same guys that say, we now know, will also, within 10 years, reverse their positions on the previous we now know. I'm not joking. This Dawkins is on tape doing this, where he said, and I've pointed out many, many times, rest in peace, our friend Chris, many, many years ago, pointed this out. He used to have the clip. I don't know if the clip is still on YouTube or not, but the junk DNA mistake, right?
And we saw in graphic detail his life end that way. I think that's why this is having such a profound effect on people. And the reason that it has shaken everybody to their core, and in some ways, unconscionably has become divisive somehow, is because there are a lot of decent people still left in this country. And maybe they're right-wing, and maybe they're left-wing, and maybe they voted for Trump, and maybe they didn't. But in that moment, when they saw this young man, this young father, this young husband, a good man, a congenial, by every metric, a positive, cheerful person, a generative person, someone who loved America, fought for what he believed in, a disciplined person, did not indulge in vices, a family man, to see someone like this gunned down in cold blood, in such a cowardly act, from such a distance like that. In that moment, what was confusing before about our country, what was divisive before, where there was moral confusion or obfuscation, there was clarity. And I don't care who you voted for. I don't care what your politics are. People, white and black, men and women, feminists, conservatives, people that are straight, people that are gay. I saw across Instagram, TikTok, a good deal of people, I hope the majority in this country, were shaken to their core because they saw true evil. When the assassin's bullet cracked and the shot rang out and people saw this young, good man die for no good reason, someone knowable to us, every decent person that still has a conscience, and I choose to use that word, everyone with a conscience was able to say clearly, that is evil, that is wrong. It is wrong to violate the sanctity of life in that way. Our lives are not our own. We belong to each other. We belong to God. We did not create ourselves. We belong to our Creator. To see another human being, I don't care what they've said in the past, I don't care what their opinions are, to see someone summarily executed in such a brutal way like that, there was a moment of clarity where people saw, and this is an all too familiar sight, people saw evil, and it shocked them to their core. People saw true evil, weakness, cowardice, violence, hatred, taking away someone who loved and was loved for no reason, unjustly. And people reacted with sorrow, outrage, anger. It made people sick. It shook people up. Because we were born with a moral law written on our hearts. It's not just written in the Gospels. It's not just written in the lives of the saints. It's also written on our hearts. We know right from wrong. We know it when we see it. We feel it. We feel it on a deeper level. It makes us physiologically sick to see it. I think that's why it had such a profound impact. And the reason that it has people so shaken up, another reason, as I said before, is
I won't
because
explain where
this
exactly
is the middle
just yet, but
of
don't
a very
worry.
long
For now,
story.
let's just say Mario is very, very far away.
As we all know,
In
this
fact,
did not
he's
come
3
out of
million units
nowhere.
away, or about 168
There were many
times
events
the size
that
of the map.
precipitated this.
What
We can
matters
talk
here is
about
that the
the
elevator
attempted
Mario was on just one
assassination of
frame
Donald
earlier
Trump
has started
last year when
rotating
he was shot in
because
the
of an
ear,
oversight in the game's code.
and his
Under
display
specific
of
conditions,
strength,
rotating
of
platforms
courage,
can affect Mario
in the
for
face
one
of a
extra frame
cowardly
after
attack
he's no longer on them.
inspired
Now,
millions of
platform
people,
rotating by 2.8
billions of
degrees
people
usually has
around
no
the
noticeable
world.
impact, but magnify it over 3
They saw
million
that
units
little
of distance,
twerp,
and
that
suddenly
coward,
those 2.8
that
degrees
climbed up on the
definitely
roof
matter.
and took a shot.
In fact, they matter so much
And
that
they
in one
saw
frame,
Trump
Mario
in that
instantly
moment who
gets
had
brought
nothing
below
on
the
his
death
mind
barrier,
other
which
than
in this
that he
stage
needed
doesn't
to
kill him, but
reassure
instead kicks him
his
back out
people,
into the castle ground,
show
specifically
them
here.
he was not
The reason why
defeated
this
or
is useful
deterred.
is that Mario's speed has two components,
He
the
rose up
horizontal
and raised
speed and the
his
sliding
fist,
speed.
rallied
The
the people
horizontal
to the
speed is
side
used for most movement,
of
and the
strength,
sliding
of
speed is used
goodness,
when
of
sliding.
righteousness.
Both speeds are set at the same value most of the time,
He
but some
survived by the
scenarios will
grace of
update
God.
Mario's horizontal speed without updating his sliding
We
speed.
saw it when
Being on the water
Luigi
is one of those
Mangione gunned
scenarios.
down the healthcare
Therefore,
CEO
while Mario is swimming around,
months
he keeps
later.
whatever sliding speed he had entering the water, which in this case is
And like the attack on Charlie Kirk yesterday,
2,965,712.
the attack
And
by
this is
Luigi
where the magic
Mangione
happens.
was another chain reaction. In that moment, we saw a young man kill a father, a husband, another
so
innocent.
how does
Once
this part
again,
work?
people say
To
he
answer
worked for
that, we
some
need to talk
company, he
about
worked for an
overflow
evil industry,
Oh, and parallel universes.
shot in cold blood, no
in Super Mario
trial.
64, Mario's
no
position can be
charge.
in any area of 3D space. However, when
His
the
life
game
was
checks
not
to see if
Luigi
Mario has a
Mangione's
floor
to
under
take.
him, it converts that position into an integer that can range from
And for
negative
some reason, this divided the country. There were
32,768
millions of
to
people that
positive
said he was a hero, treated him like a sex
32,767.
icon.
If Mario's position is
champion.
beyond this range, then
They
this
made
conversion
t-shirts.
overflows and loops back
They
around,
celebrated.
which means that Mario's real position and his
Is
floor
anybody
detection
surprised
position
now
become disjointed.
that you have
If
incidents
Mario's
like
floor
this?
detection position happens to be
anybody
in a
the
place
least
where
bit
there's ground to
surprised?
stand on, then he can stand on that ground.
In a culture
So,
where
for all
mass
intents and
murder
purposes,
and murder
there is
is
a copy of
celebrated,
the map on each multiple of
people cheer it on, they lionize
65,536 units that
cowardly
Mario can sort
assassins
of
and
interact
killers.
with.
Is anybody
I
the
say
least
sort
bit
of because
surprised
only
that
the floor
it
detection is handled
inspired a
this way, so there are
copycat?
no walls,
It
objects, or
inspired
textures out
another?
there. These incomplete
It shouldn't
copies
come
of the
as a
map are called
surprise.
parallel universes, or PUs
But
for
there's
short.
other echoes of
This
the
is a
violence that we
to-scale
saw
diagram
yesterday.
of parallel universes.
We
As
saw
you
it
can see,
imminently
most of the
just
space
the
is out
other
of
week.
bounds, and so it cannot be accessed.
When that young
This means
girl,
that navigating
Ukrainian
PUs
refugee, was stabbed to
requires
death
a
on
very
the train.
specific speed in order to actually work.
We saw it when Austin
But
Metcalf
remember,
was
when
stabbed in the
attempting
throat.
to move Mario, the game divides this movement
At a
into
football
4 quarter
practice.
steps. For Mario to
We see
actually
it in
move
Gaza
into a PU, he
for
needs to have a
years.
large enough speed that
When
even the
innocent
first quarter
people are
step
shot
is
in the
a
back
PU,
of the head
which means
getting
he
food
needs
for
to
their
be able
children
to move
because
up
they're
to a
starving.
multiple of 4 PUs over. The speed required to perform a
weight
PU
of the
movement is called the
suffering.
sinking speed.
The
Small
cruelty,
deviations
the
to the sinking
malice,
speed and angle will
the
still move
hatred,
Mario
it's
to a
becoming
PU, but
too
they will
much
also
to bear.
move him relatively
I
to
think
the
that's
map.
the real reason.
Now remember what happens
Because
if
we've
Mario's
seen
position is
violence
valid
before.
after
We've
1
seen
quarter step,
horrible
but becomes
atrocities
invalid after
before.
the next one. He
We've
is moved
seen
up to, but
school
not beyond,
shootings,
the last
terrorist
valid quarter
attacks.
step of his movement.
But we all
This means
recognize
that if
we
the
live in
first
a
quarter steps
time
of Mario's
of
movement line up with a
nihilistic
PU, but at some
violence.
point they stop lining up, Mario will end up
And it's
moving
coming
into
from
a
all
PU, but
sides.
not by a multiple of 4.
Nihilistic
So, with this in
violence
mind, where
perpetrated
did
by
Mario end up when he
barbarians,
was 3 million units
like
away in the
these
Vanished Capital?
opportunists and
Well, it turns out
predators,
that he was in a
these
parallel
young,
universe.
mostly
Mario ends up
adolescent
here,
black men
32 PUs away in
that
each
are
direction.
preying upon the
But his
innocent
floor
and the
detection
vulnerable
position,
on
which we'll call his
city
relative
subways,
position
city
from now
streets.
on, barely moves.
We see it in the
Since the game still
barbarism,
detects
the
him as being
predatory,
on the elevator,
opportunistic
he can
attacks,
stand where he is for 1
executions,
frame before the game
random,
detects that he's
cruel
too far
acts
for
of
the platform
violence.
to be solid. Thankfully,
We see
Mario
it
only
in
needs to be on the
Zionism.
PU elevator elevator for that one
Dare
frame.
I say,
At this point, the elevator starts
in a certain
rotating,
strain
and
of the
2.8
Jewish
degree
religion,
rotation is applied over a distance
which
of
says
32
that the
PUs,
people of
warping Mario down
Palestine are
under the depth
collectively
barrier, which triggers
responsible
immediately and
for the
kicks him out
actions of
the stage.
Hamas.
So
None
now,
of them
with
are innocent.
2.9
They all
million
must
feet up
die.
the sleeve, Mario is ready to embark
And
on this
sitting
magical
members of
journey
Congress
into
like
parallel
Randy
universes.
Fine
Let's go through it step by step to
celebrates
understand
famine,
what happens
starving
in
women
it.
and children.
Unfortunately, like
A
I said
million
earlier,
people
the
under the
camera
age
is
of
set
18 being
fixed.
blown to
That is
smithereens.
because the Nintendo 64 console
Being
crashes
starved
if the camera
forcibly.
tries to follow Mario into a PU.
We see it in
Fixing
another
the camera
form, which
onto
is
the main map
leftism.
gets around this limitation, which allows the
Communists,
run to be played back on a
anarchists.
real console with no issues.
There is a
So
certain
to help
strain of
visualizing
radical
everything, we'll use 4
transsexuals.
different screens. The actual view,
For them,
which won't
everything
be
is
very
political,
useful because the
everything is
camera is fixed.
ideological.
The relative view, which will follow Mario
All
while
this
making PUs visible
propaganda that's
using a
got them
camera
whipped
hack.
up about
The relative map,
fascism,
which will show where Mario's
a
relative position is, or
transgenocide,
in other
about
words,
the
where Mario's
healthcare
location inside
system.
of the PU relates on a map. And finally, the PU map, which shows where
They
Mario
believe the
actually
meaning of
is on a
life
map
is
that
a
spans
political
PU
struggle,
distances.
a political victory. And so they have no love, no charity towards their opponents. These are the different strains of nihilistic violence coming from all angles that we've seen. And notice it comes from everywhere. It comes from the political left. And by the political left, I don't mean every Democrat, I don't mean every liberal, I don't mean every Kamala voter. I mean a specific sect of the radical left that recognizes no limiting principles. We see that kind of nihilistic violence from a certain crowd of Jewish Zionists and their allies. Some evangelical Christians, atheistic Jews that are sympathetic, that wield immense influence in our government, and they want to wield our military against their adversaries. And we see it in the barbarians. We see it in the unthinking, primitive, backwards, regressive, you could say, undeveloped masses of people in other unenlightened parts of the world that are coming here and visiting the savagery upon us. And if there is anything that can come out of this, I hope that it can be potentially a new consensus. This is not partisan, actually. It's not even ideological. People do not murder children in a Catholic church because they have gender dysphoria necessarily, or they're sympathetic to transsexuals. Somebody does not murder Charlie Kirk because they voted for Kamala Harris. People do not stab young girls on trains because they're born black. People do not shoot Palestinians in the back of the head or cheer it on just because they're Jewish. The people that do this are lost. They have to be isolated and segregated out. A new consensus must emerge. Are you in favor of a society with meaning? A society where life is sacred, where life has sanctity, where people's lives and their dignity and their integrity is respected? Or are we going to live in a society that is a never-ending war between nihilistic tribes, warlords, savages, pagans? I see an emerging consensus, and I think that the mature people that actually love America, actually love our children, the people that recognize the division, the peril that we're in, we need to fortify a new consensus and rally the people of conscience, the people of decency, the people of humanity, the people of charity towards their fellow man, against those that want to kill us, against those that laugh and celebrate when innocent people are harmed. For any reason, for any ideological reason, against the people that are cruel, the people that are hateful. And by that I mean the people that are really cruel, not the people that say things you disagree with, not the people that are provocative, not the people that are sometimes angry, but the people that are really cruel and really evil. And let me be clear about this, because I understand not a lot of people are loving this message right now. This is not the message that a lot of people want to hear right now. Here's another message you can try on for size. These people that are now selling t-shirts with Charlie Kirk and a bullet wound in his neck, they cannot be negotiated with. You cannot debate with them. You cannot persuade them to vote Republican. You cannot appeal to them. You will never convince them that you're a good person, that you just want the best for everybody. You will never get them to stop hating you. People like to say, well, can the left finally admit that they have their own problem? They'll never admit that. They'll never admit that. These craven losers, that person that when Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck, instinctually got up and turned and celebrated They have to be defeated. We can't change their minds. We can't invite them to change our minds. We can't negotiate with them. We can't invite them for a political compromise. If your gut reaction to seeing someone take a bullet in the neck and their face explode, and their young children run up to them because they were afraid of the noise, if your reaction was to grin and celebrate, you must be defeated. You must be destroyed. You must be identified, you must be isolated, and you must be eradicated from our society. Not Democrats, not leftists, not liberals, those people that would celebrate in that moment. That is pure evil, pure malice. There is no charity in a person's heart. I don't care who it is who sees anybody get their neck exploded and celebrate like that. That's the kind of evil we're dealing with. That's the kind of evil that has taken over our society. It has become too common. People have let it fester. Like with Luigi Mangione, they thought it was cute. They thought it was glib. And look at what we have now. We are on the verge of full-on political violence and civil war. I don't think people realize what that looks like. There's going to be a lot of children without mothers and fathers, a lot of mothers and fathers grieving their dead children. I don't want that. Nobody should want that. But when it comes to evil people, cowardly, weak, evil people that snipe and Trump and Charlie Kirk like the gunman that came to my house last year, unfortunately, it's not always up to us which battles we fight. When they show up to your front door, when they take shots at the rally, at the Change My Mind, we don't have a choice. We have to confront evil. We have to fight evil. We can never give in to evil, and we have to win. Recognize this. If these people ever get power over us, these people that celebrate, they sell t-shirts, they steal hats. When a man is lying dead, they will hurt you. They will hurt your children, and they will destroy everything that is sacred to us, everything that we love, and they will do it with a smile. They're already doing it. They have done it. They're telling on themselves. And Sam Hyde said it very well. All their cutesy language, their word games, their sarcasm, their irony, it is dripping with malevolence, dripping with contempt, dripping with malevolence and malice. And if these people ever win, we will all suffer the same fate as Charlie Kirk. They have to be defeated, utterly and fundamentally. Now, this is not a call to violence, because taking up arms against these people, what will that do? It will invite more of it. The Satanists, the devil worshippers, the malevolent people that do these things, in part, they do it to stoke resentment, to stoke conflict. They take the things that we love away from us so that we will abandon God, so that we will become like them. That is, whether they know it or not, that is why they do it. That is why they are impelled to do it by spiritual, supernatural forces. I believe that. Do not mistake what I mean by defeat them. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. But I want to make that clear right now. This is not a call for violence. Here is what I will say about left-wingers, because a lot of left-wing people reached out to me, and they told me, you have a responsibility. They said, we're afraid right now. They said, you need to lead people away from violence. I agree with them. But where was that mentality when someone showed up at my house with a gun and failed? Those people are not reaching out then. Where was that mentality throughout all of the persecutions, all the suffering? Now, this is speaking from a place of resentment. They're afraid. They're afraid that the right is going to punch back 1,000 times as hard. And we could. And we can. And I fear that some might. And I hope to God that they don't. In some sense, the right to be afraid. We should all be afraid that something we cannot control may happen. Here is what I will say to those people. I and Charlie Kirk, for years, pushed a peaceful resolution. We invited the left to debate, negotiate. We played within the system. When Obama told us, you gotta win elections, you know, we tried that. And look at what they did to Trump. They shot him in the head.
Hey, Zeke, I got your food for you.
We tried to do it your way.
Hey, buddy, I got your
We
food.
tried to debate, to go to the polls, the voting booth. People ran for office, and what did they encounter? Intimidation, menacing, harassment, slander, lies, assassination attempts, and successes. Now the left says we need to bring down the temperature. Here is what I would say to the left. The left now has an obligation. You can turn down the temperature. The left in America now, everybody in America now must come together and disavow this nihilistic, malevolent violence. You all have an obligation. I have that obligation, and I think I have done it. I condemn the violence, all of it, all of the nihilistic violence, whether it comes from the far right, the far left, whether it comes from a Dylan Roof, the Buffalo shooter, or someone like this. It's your job too. You must condemn it loudly, loud enough that we can hear it, and you have to mean it. And I think of somebody like Hassan Piker, such a hollow, empty, sad person. Hassan Piker saw Charlie Kirk, someone that he knew, get shot in the neck and his neck erupt with blood. We don't need to be graphic about the details, but everybody should look at that long and hard and let it sit with you. When Hassan saw that, his first reaction was to make a glib remark about gun control. Seriously? That's a 31-year-old man. That's a young man with a wife and kids. He got shot in cold blood, publicly executed in front of thousands of college students. Never forget the trauma of his children, of his family. What about the people that witnessed this? What about everybody that will be affected by the knock-on violence that results from this? And you hollow, sick person, your response is to make some glib remark about gun control? You. And here's my message to Hassan Piker and every liberal sucker like him. You better disavow this violence. You better cry like Dean Withers. And I don't say that, maybe that comes off like I'm humiliating him. Who knows whether that was sincere or not? I hope to God that it was, and if it was, you know what? Good on him. That's a good kid. And he said some nasty things about me. That's a kid with a conscience. He said, I don't think we should kill people for disagreeing. Is that divisive now? He had to apologize for weeping that someone he knew was murdered. That kid has a conscience. I have some faith in that generation. Here's my message to Hassan and all these smug, glib liberals like that. If you cannot, if you will not disavow this violence, we will have no choice but to consider you as no different than the killers. That's complicity. You could be forgiven up until this point for being irresponsible. We all get heated. We all do it. I'm guilty of it too. It makes hypocrites of all of us. We murder each other with our words all the time, with our gossip, our slander. We overreact. We say things we don't mean. We get angry. We harbor grudges and resentment, things that we should not.
Oh, you got viruses
And
on
that's
your
not to
PC,
excuse it.
buddy. I'm gonna click it though.
But the day that someone gets shot for the disagreement, if you can't bring yourself to show the slightest ounce of humanity to a moderate Republican who got killed for no reason,
Maybe it's gonna fix it though.
this is a moment we all recognize could set us down the path towards a civil war, could set us down the path towards unbelievable horror, suffering, bloodshed. If you can't bring yourself, even for the selfish sake of yourself or your own people or your own pathetic side, to show the slightest ounce of humility, of mercy, of magnanimity, benevolence, charity, then you are no better than the killer.
Chad, did we remove the viruses? Listen.
And that means that you must be destroyed politically as well. That's not a call to violence. But people like that have to be suppressed.
I'm cleaning up his PC like he asked me to.
They should be censored on the internet. They need to be named and shamed. And this is where I say, what does victory look like? Here's what it looks like in the short term. This is a very delicate situation. This is a very delicate situation. I fear that this has set off a chain reaction. I pray to God there is no further violence. I pray to God that nobody else is hurt as a result of this. I hope that it stops here. It should stop here. To all of my followers, if you take up arms, I disavow you, I disown you in the strongest possible terms. That is not what we are about. And the same goes obviously for the other side.
On me, Evelyn?
And I want to make that very clear. It would be a profound, moral, political mistake for anybody to take the bait and to engage in any kind of reprisal, retaliation, revenge. Remember, we are the good side, and what makes us good is that we have Christ. What makes Christianity and Christ so different from the other religions is that our religion is based on the bearing of suffering for the sake of even those that persecute us. An overflowing of love. An overflowing of
All right. I'm back now. Sorry, it took me a long time. Kind of. Alright, let's just play Splitgate 2 right now. I've been streaming, I've had two, let's see, how long have I been streaming for? Who knows? Alright. Let's do it. Mic's kinda low though. Hey, my touchpad is it's kinda dirty. Alright. Hello? I can't tell. Hello? It's not doing a good job. I think it's working now. All right. Let's go to TDM. Alright, the fans are revving up. I do like that the PS5 mic it still works with OBS. Seems like it still has the bass and everything. So that's good. You can barely hear it. The stuff in the background. Maybe. Sorry if you hear some people in the background. That's my other family. Oh wait, am I playing, I think I might have to lower it. For some reason this game doesn't play nice with, OBS.
Team Deathmatch starts now. 4, 3, 2,
Yeah, keep it.
1.
This is what we train for. Earn the most kills to secure the victory.
Alright, let's go.
We've fallen behind and turn this around. Great hit!
Power weapon inbound.
Dang. This is gonna get me. I gotta get used to.
New power weapon in the arena.
Thank you. Oh, I got beat down. Well, that was some lag. I'll get used to it.
Avenger. We are so back. Double kill. Payback.
I kind of wish that if there was a way I could stop the button clicking. Maybe there is, but I haven't figured it out yet.
Power weapon inbound.
They're halfway there.
Avenger.
Yeah, they're halfway
Payback.
there.
New power weapon in the arena.
Like, where are they? Maybe I'll have to get a new mic. Alright, that guy person dead. I'm kind of not used to it after playing Call of Duty for so long.
Power weapon inbound. New power weapon in the arena. Heating up. Power weapon inbound.
No enemies detected.
They're close to the scoring limit. We have to stop them.
New power weapon in the arena. Five minutes remaining.
I don't know how these guys don't get them.
Defeated.
Shake it off. Great players bounce back
I'll
stronger.
do better. It just takes a while. This is kind of loud. Yeah, let's turn it down. Okay. What was that? What? No. Yeah, what's going on? Do these headphones suck, the ones I'm using? They skip when I don't want to. Okay. I gotta figure out a way to make the mic better. What's it look like the lag? Oh, what's going on here? Okay. Maybe I'll have to go to 720p. This is embarrassing. Oh my gosh. Can these guys try to finish him off, please? Like, I know it's like hard and all, but I might have to go down to 720p. It actually might be better than 900p. I'm not even playing that well.
Power weapon inbound.
Over here. Alright, 720p. Well, it seems to be going smoother. Where are the rest of my people? Oh my gosh. I'm not playing that well. Yeah, we lost. I gotta change the volume. Now I gotta change this too. Well, I want to.
Here's Minecraft beaten in 20 seconds.
Put that up a little.
It may look like absolute chaos right now, but I assure you that by the end of this video, you will understand everything that's going on. Let's start from the beginning. What is
Let's put that up a little.
Despite its primary nature of being a 3D sandbox game, Minecraft actually does have some sort of progression.
Yeah, wait, what the?
The goal of Minecraft is to defeat the Ender Dragon, found in the dimension at
What happened to Split Gate 2?
To do that, one must typically get rid of end crystals sitting atop pillars of obsidian that regenerate the dragon's health, then take it down slowly but surely. Of course, players are free to completely ignore this quest and sink thousands of hours into the game recreating Middle Earth or building a computer that runs Minecraft itself, but the goal of the speedrun is to reach that ending as fast as possible. Now, those with a keen eye may have noticed the Ender Dragon is nowhere to be seen in this run. Don't worry, we'll get to that. This is a
Split Gate 2, where are you?
DC4Q, a category called any % set seed. The four main categories in Minecraft are any % set seed,
Come on,
set
Split
seed
Gate 2.
glitchless, random seed, and random seed glitchless. Glitchless categories disallow of using any bug in the game, and while they are more popular among real-time Minecraft runners, they typically result in a slower run time. Here, the ultimate goal is to create the fastest possible speedrun, so glitches were used. Any % simply means to reach the ending by all means necessary, with any amount of
Alright.
being completed.
Hello.
This is by far the most popular approach, but there's a myriad of other arbitrary flows players can race towards. Set seed refers to the world generation. Here, the two options are set seed and random seed. A core element of Minecraft's identity is that the world is procedurally generated randomly. The random world generation
Okay, so the default is the wireless controller.
return the same world, but change one digit in the result. This could be completely different. Speedruns that use random seeds cannot set this number, so runners are dropped in a completely random world in every attempt.
I gotta figure out how to
In set seed, the runner is allowed to replay the same world over and over. This
change the
favorable conditions,
proximity.
learn where things are, and figure out the fastest route, resulting in a much more optimized run.
Because otherwise people are just gonna hear stuff in the background.
Tool-assisted speedrun, or TAS for short, is a carefully crafted creation. It was still done by a real person, in this case still in DC14, but it was made using tooling. Was to slow down the game, read by segments if he ever made a mistake. Typically, the task is created on an emulator using save states, memory watch, and frame advance, but this is not actually possible for modern PC games.
Proximity.
Instead,
Oh,
logic
shit.
used to slow the game down to a fraction of its full speed, so when the video plays back at normal speed, the player looks like they have superhuman speed and reflexes. To replace it with more save states, the game was simply saved and loaded back when Dylan wanted to retry a specific section. For most of the run, he slowed the game down by a factor of 40 to 80. If you're still confused about my passes, please watch this video. Keep in mind that this speedrun is in no way trying to compete with real-time speedrunners. It's a demonstration of what's possible in every game. Here's the basic premise of the path Dylan took to beat the game. The ending is triggered by entering this portal, which appears when the Ender Dragon is defeated. Like I mentioned before, the Ender Dragon is actually skipped in this road. To reach the end, the player must fill in and enter the end portal found in this stronghold, with a unique dungeon found underground in the main world. The portal is completed using Hives of Ender, a special item created by combining an Ender Pearl with a blaze powder. An Ender Pearl is an item dropped by Endermen, creepy slender enemies. It can also be found in chests and fuel locations or acquired by trading. Blaze powder is made by breaking down blaze rods, which drop from a blaze, a fiery enemy found in nether fortresses. To reach a nether fortress, one must build a portal to the nether using blocks of obsidian, flint and steel. Obsidian is generated by the blocks that can only be mined using a diamond pickaxe. Luckily, it can be found in small quantities in random chests as well. The same goes for the flint and steel. While it's normally creating a furnace for Nigeria, it can also be found in random chests. So, in short, Dylan used to find flint and steel, obsidian, and ender pearls in random chests, create a find a nether fortress, kill a blaze, collect its rod and break it into powder, combine it with the ender pearl to create eyes of ender, or the end portal to defeat the ender dragon in 20 seconds. Let's dive into it and see how he did it. The first obvious thing is that Dylan spawns directly next to a chest that contains a golden axe with a silk pouch enchantment, obsidian with flint and steel. Just how lucky is that? Well, this is where the importance of the set seed comes in. Dylan was able to choose a string of numbers that would get him the world with the most favorable conditions to beat the game the fastest.
One comes, the other one comes
set
too.
of specific conditions that he needed for the optimal result was mined manually and lightly. Right next to the spawn is a ruined portal that naturally generated damaged nether portal also has a chest containing
So I
4
gotta-
items from this list. He needed the chest to contain Golden Steel, Obsidian, Golden Axe, and an item with the Silk Touch enchantment. In this case, the axe itself has the enchantment. To his right is a woodland mansion, a large random structure that's typically generated very far from the starting location, tens of thousands of blocks away, spawning directly next to what is astronomically rare. The two rooms here are a fake ant portal room and a lava room. Those two are
Yeah, see, it's all...
dimension, so them being right there is also incredibly unlikely. Once Dylan goes into the nether, he needs to end up near a nether fortress where he can find a blaze. Even better is a blaze spawner. This scene is a blaze spawner only 7 tiles away. Dylan also needs an area where a gas can spawn and favorable terrain to navigate inside the nether. The stronghold where the end portal can be found needs to be looked characteristically close. Finally, the spawn point in the end dimension can be underground or exposed. It needed to be exposed for the optimal run. Quick side note, throughout this video, watch out for numbered notes in the bottom right corner.
I wanted
You can
that.
find a link to additional notes that provide
I don't
context
get
and
why,
clarifications in the
like,
video description.
teammates
In
can't,
order to
like,
get this incredible combination of rare
take
abilities, Dylan
advantage.
ran a script that parsed through about 2 thin
Come on, man.
He looked
So
through
I,
dozens
how
of
can
most
they
promising
not...
notes manually. This is the
Well, I
single
mean,
best
we
seed.
almost came back and won if
It's
we
possible
do.
that more solutions exist.
But,
The script Dylan ran looked at over 10% of every possible seed in Minecraft, so this one is at least pretty good. From the chest, Dylan takes out the obsidian, flint and steel, and the golden axe with silk touch. The obsidian and flint and
but
steel
they're
can
not
be used to build
incompetent either.
to travel to the nether. Dylan gets the
So,
golden axe
yeah.
and can break down the wooden walls of the woodland mansion as quickly as possible. Golden tools have the fastest base gathering speed in the game, even better than diamond tools, but their garbage durability makes them very
Yeah, I came back and do
This
something.
is one of those cases, because Dylan doesn't need the durability, only raw speed. He needs the silk touch enchantment to gather glass for later. The first room breaks into a fake end.
Like, I wasn't there for,
It's
like,
made to look like the end of the room.
anyway,
Instead, the structure is
just jumped up and
there's
back.
a trapped chest. When the chest is
I
opened,
still did second place on my team.
breaking infested cobblestone
Somehow.
walls that release silverfish enemies. The chest
And it's
always
still
contains
lagging
two
a little,
items, which is
but that's
perfect because
okay.
Dylan needs those. First off, he breaks a block in the wall while climbing to the chest to allow him to go into the next room over afterwards. There's a noticeable cut here because Dylan
Oh, wait, oh yeah, that's what I was gonna do.
Minecraft speedruns are usually measured using
Wait, can't start matchmaking.
ability from loading screens and other factors. As such, any time spent paused, loading,
Wait, what did it say?
doesn't count, but time spent crafting or looking inside the chest does. Only the time where the game is actually running was kept for this task. Transitions like loading screens or quitting and reloading the save are completely removed. There will be more of these cuts but this one is perhaps the most
Team
obvious.
deathmatch.
Dylan first breaks one TNT block, then he picks up the ender pearls from the trapped chest,
Oh,
which activates
okay.
the other
Okay, so I can't do it
takes
because
4
of...
seconds before blowing up, which gives enough time to get out of the way. The explosion will
So
actually
they
freeze
are
when
different, like,
Dylan then immediately puts the pearls back in the chest,
different...
obsidian and the block of wood to pick
And
up
a different, like, party.
because with a sprinkle of magic, as soon as he reopens the chest, the items are both in the chest and still in his inventory, effectively doubling that. How does that happen? The answer is very simple. The game saves the state of chests and your inventory independently of each other. After Dylan puts the items in the chest,
You could
the
just
chest
turn up the
inventory is saved.
volume.
His inventory isn't saved yet. Then, by quitting and reloading the world, he can reload the inventory state from before
You know
he put in
what?
the items, and the chest state from after he put them
Yeah,
in.
these
So only the items
headphones.
being both on him and in the chest. But the game is not that dumb.
Good thing I'm getting better ones.
By force quitting using on the floor, it will save your inventory. However, if you crash the game by force
These
using
headphones
the task
kinda
manager's
suck.
end task function, you won't get the luxury of saving your inventory before the process is killed.
They keep stopping and skipping.
Reload the save, and the items will be in both places at once.
It's weird.
Between the two chest openings. Remember, run is timed using in-game time, which effectively renders this process.
Dude, there's not even many people playing this game.
So Dylan ends up with 32 of each item. In the middle of the play,
The fact we get bots even with crossplay tells you that.
throwing an ender pearl allows the player to teleport. When the ender pearl lands, the player is instantly teleported.
Alright.
This indication that they take 2.5 bars of damage. But it takes some time for the ender pearl to travel.
So here's what I'm going to do.
This gives enough time to finish the chest duplication and make a crafting table for later.
I am going
When the Ender
to
Pearl finally lands,
talk
Dylan
about
doesn't actually take damage. This is because whenever a player relogs into the game, they
well,
benefit from the
I don't know,
3-second
I'll just talk about like
This is intended to give players
what I
enough time
do,
to find their bearings,
maybe
but this guy,
some
3 seconds
politics,
might as well
maybe
be
some religion, but I've already talked to those in the like many past commentaries I've done. But I just want to say that I'm a brown emo LDS boy. I'm a Mormon, and we believe Jesus Christ is God, but we also believe that we are eternal, but that God still has all power and all knowledge,
regardless of the visual frame rate, Minecraft is a fixed
and He is
This means Dylan
He's
can't
the
do more than
best.
a single meaningful action, like
But
placing
this is
a block or using
because
an item every
God,
20th of a second. As soon as the
or
portal is lit up,
however
Dylan
you
knows
want
what
to
do.
say,
To be taken into the nether, the player
God,
needs to stand in the portal for 4 seconds. If they step
God
out for any
is
length of time, this timer resets. In the
God
meantime,
is
harvest to
the
the
one
water
who
class
gives meaning to life. God is the one who has objective morality and objective pragmatism. Because even if you say God's not real, believing in Him works for many, especially the Christian God, which is Jesus. And that's why even if you don't think Jesus Christ is God, Jesus Christ is pragmatic. He's completely pragmatic because it works, and people believe in Him, think He's real, and yeah, it works for Him because
the game actually doesn't care that you're standing in any specific nether portal. Because the teleportation is instantaneous, Dylan never
it
spends
works for
any time
him
outside the
because
so he can travel from one to the other
he's
before
still
second time
a
back.
historical
Now that
person.
he's against the wall, he can wait a bit.
He's a historical
If you forget
person,
about the TNT from earlier, well, it just blew up the
and so
The chest and the TNT blocks are sitting on a ring of green goo,
yeah.
which gets flung in the explosion.
That's kind
This
of
is
why
Dylan
he's
created a second portal
actually
so that he could stand in the path of those weak
even
blocks and catch them.
non-believers
He
who
places the
think
crafting
Jesus
table and gets to work.
wasn't
First, he makes planks out of his wood
he
blocks so he
wasn't
can craft the
God.
rest of the items.
They still
Then
would say
makes
he
2
was
chests
a
and more crafting
like
tables.
most scholars have him at he's a real historical person.
While the rest of the 4-second timer plays out. Dylan finally lands in the nether. First order of business is throwing an ender pearl for future teleportation.
Right.
Second order of business is placing a bed.
Oh, I thought these were pots or something.
But as
It's like
soon as he
no way.
tries to slide on the recovers, the bed explodes. This is
Now,
actually
where's
not a
my
bug,
teammates
it's a
at?
feature. If you don't believe me, if you die from a bed explosion, get the message player was killed by intentional game design.
Right,
Normally in
anyway.
Minecraft, sleeping in a bed skips the rest of the night until it's daytime again, and it sets your spawn point next to the bed. But you can only sleep in a bed in the main world. Instead of making it so you couldn't make a place a bed in the nether or in the end, the developers decided to add an Easter egg. Attempting to sleep in a bed in these dimensions will make the bed explode and set fire to nearby blocks, and an explosion even stronger than TNT. Dylan actually places and explodes 3 of his 4 beds in very quick succession.
Like, where is
Again, these explosions don't
where's
damage
the
him
other
because of the
people?
invincibility period. They move him faster than rocket. They also affect the Ender Pearl, flinging it away further and faster than a normal
Where
When this pearl
Where
lands,
is
it transports
everybody?
him close to where the stronghold is in the
I was like turning on new moves or whatever. I really very impressive when I said that.
Normally there's a 1-second cooldown after throwing the pearl, but this
Like
cooldown is
trying
reset
out new
upon
moves or whatever.
This allows them to
I
throw
might have to react to him, but I've already uploaded. I've already uploaded like 2 big videos on him. And what I believe are like basically his best rages ever.
He uses the chest to duplicate his remaining bed in the second chest in the glass block in some obsidian. He doubles up the glass and beds before a which and his pearl lands next to a blaze. Dylan places a bed right next to a blaze and throws it up. He makes sure to punch the blaze first to mark it as being damaged by him. Bed explosions don't count as damage by a player. He's killed by environmental hazards. Never
Did he
counts
disconnect?
It drops drops a blaze rod, which he picks up and immediately doubles using the chest. He also duplicates his glass and beds again. He now has all the ingredients to craft Eyes of Ender and open the portal to the end. At this point, the second Ender Pearl came through, which I said would land about a second and a half later, finally lands, and he still
we're coming back now.
a large random enemy in the nether. Note that although the world can be generated using the set scene, randomly spawning enemies like blazes and gas depend on in-game random number generation.
I used to be a lot better with this sniper, I think.
The secret method to kill the dragon, a gas tube. Dylan blows it up with the bed, then he quickly repositions with an Ender Pearl, places down the crafting table on the chest, and gets to work. He doubles his blades rod twice to get to 8, turns them into 16 blaze powders, combines 13 of them with Ender Pearls to make Eyes of Ender. He uses one of those eyes, 7 glass blocks, and the gas tier hits
So actually, let's go this way.
and crystals are the objects that heal the Ender Dragon at the end, but they also serve another purpose. When crafted and placed in a particular way, they can be used to spawn
You
or
should
respawn
have had
the Ender Dragon. This is the key to the strategy to defeat the dragon quickly. After creating all of these items, Dylan does a bit of inventory management and warps it out. This is when the first Ender Pearl he threw when he entered the nether
I'm out of ammo.
in order. First throw traveled the furthest
snort.
and the longest, then the second
Snort,
landed
snort.
last, and the sword throw to the blaze spawner below him landed first. Dylan now
Oh
builds
my
another
goodness.
portal. In 4 seconds, he will return home, this time to a new location.
What the heck is my teammates?
Are linked to each other in the same relative position.
Am I going to just carry this whole
8
thing?
times smaller than the world. Therefore, portals that link the two dimensions are 8 times further apart than the
I might have to carry it because I think these guys are, or maybe they are. I don't know.
After an excruciatingly long wait, Gordon is finally back in the world. This portal conveniently sits right in the entrance to the underportal room of the
No, I should
A quick Ender Pearl
get in
gets
there. I was gonna say I should get in there.
places all 12 eyes of Ender in the portal,
But
repositioning with a pearl that
we all were beginners. Actually, on my first try, I didn't even do that bad. But that's also because I'm pretty good at the first sport key. And anyway, I don't understand why.
When entering the end for the first time, it takes 1 second for the
How
Ender
are
Dragon
my
to
teammates so bad?
However, placing this crystal throws a wrench in the process. The dragon and the exit portal appear at the same time. When an end crystal is placed before the spawn, it finds that there's no exit portal, so it spawns a new one and opens it by default. Then, when the Ender Dragon tries to spawn, it's
Alright,
prevented
let's
from
do
doing
that.
so because the exit portal is already open. The end result is that the Ender Dragon is banished into the void and simply never appears. Since the exit portal is already open, all Dylan needs to do now is to get there. He throws an Ender Pearl towards the center of the arena, and again resorts to the bed explosion technique to boost the speed and distance of his throw, this time using 4 beds. This tosses him off the map and into the infinite void where he can
Can I
contemplate
get
his
some
existence.
better
Just before
teammates?
he falls to his death, the Ender
Or at
Pearl
least
lands
don't put
closer
me
to home.
against like people
One
like
final quick
this.
throw through lands him
Who
directly into the
like
portal, and the game is beaten in 19.9 seconds of in-game time. That's it. That's the fastest possible way to beat Minecraft that we currently have. It requires a 1 in a quintillion seed, perfect RNG, superhuman mouse precision and speed, and crashing the game a couple dozen times, but it is technically possible.
Like,
I wanna
it's
thank
just, I'm
Dylan
getting
DC
like
for
sandwich.
making this task, for allowing me to break it
Oh,
down,
we
for
lost now.
helping ensure this video's accuracy. And now, I will
Good
keep my
night.
promise. You can watch
You
the
guys
video
really
this
showed
time,
up.
if you focus really
Well,
hard,
one of them
you can
did.
actually keep track of what's going on. Thank you for watching.
Well, we're not going to win like that. No siree.
You just told me to check the Quran. The argument was
I was thinking about getting into crypto. I kind of see why.
We will revisit these numbers further down the line, but for now, this is what we're going to use as our
Because,
baseline. Before we go any further, though, there's a tiny annoyance we need to get out of the way.
You don't need a bank account.
How about we give
And
these two will be friends
you
as
can
a
make
joke.
money
Upstairs,
off of crypto.
Secret agent and double agent, Sam and Oliver. For completeness'
And
sake,
it's just
let's call
becoming
the
more
agent
popular now.
Of course, on the bridge, we find Bridget. Now to find out how
So
long
why
it will take
wouldn't
to
you
escape.
want to use
Here
it?
are the 6 escape points again. You would think that hostages would take the shortest path through every point, like this, for example. Of course they do. That would be too complicated. The reality is
Gosh, I
actually a lot
love
simpler
being an
than
emo.
the hostage's navigation graph. In any level of wilderness, a navigation graph is a set of interconnected nodes that defines where non-playable characters or NPCs can move.
There's gotta be some way I can
Committing so, for instance, hostages will
change
never
that proximity thing.
to go from here to there, they'll go that way instead.
Well, how do I
Now, as
change
you may
it?
have noticed, to exit the ship, there's basically a single option. Therefore,
I sound
no
like a
matter what escape
pro.
route you pick, everyone is going to first head to this area, then head over to their chosen location. This simplifies calculating their path by a huge amount. It also means that no matter who we're talking about, escape points can be ordered from the fastest to the slowest. All you need to do is find out how long each hostage takes to run to here, then how long it takes from there to every escape point. Note that the upper deck favors the back of the ship slightly, and the lower deck favors the front, but the difference is very small. There's just one exception. How does Bridget make it all the way to there in about 5 seconds?
The
The answer
Razer
is quite simple.
microphone.
They don't have to. This zone is not a circle. It's the cross-section of a sphere centered above the ship. At this elevation, the circle is rather small. At higher elevations, its radius reaches into the ship. While it also being the optimal escape point for everyone else is just a coincidence, for Bridget, the best escape point is better than the others by a much wider margin. As a side note, these two escape points are actually so high that their radius doesn't touch the ship, so hostages need to be unloaded to reach them. There's more on unloaded movement later. Now that we know how much time
Gaining
each
stuff.
hostage takes to reach
Will
every
be
escape
easy
point,
as.
what is the probability of them being fast enough? First, we need to look at the probability of choosing each escape point. When they choose their escape point, hostages call the random number generation
Done.
to get a number from 0 to 255, and they check if it's above 40, 80, 120, 160, or 200. The slightly imbalanced distribution skews the odds towards this point, giving the optimal point a 15.6%
How did he
chance
not?
of being
Well, someone got it.
However, it's possible
That's
to
like,
remove those
how did he not get
hostages
that guy?
with scientists can surrender if threatened. If you shoot near a hostage after they've chosen their destination, they will stop what they're doing and surrender. As they start to put their hands up, they immediately take a new escape point and start running. But why is rerolling a good idea if you don't know which point you picked in the first place? Well, because thanks to a bug in the code, when they choose their new destination, this time the probability for the best escape point moves to 33.8%. The problem
I didn't know I picked up the card line.
this strategy, though,
So I was gonna say, I was so confused because I haven't used that person in a long time.
useful for both Oliver and Bridget. Only Bridget can realistically be made to do this, since you hang around with longer for the thought user. There are more factors at play. Guard death animations. Hostages only begin their escape when their taker has fully faded out. There are 16 possible death animations with variable lengths and probabilities. To complicate things even more, the guard will pick from a different set of animations depending on where they put the head, torso, gut, eye, or somewhere else. Generally, numbers will be for the body or the head, so to simplify things a bit, look at the animations for those two body parts. They're actually quite similar. The head having two more possibilities, both terrible for speed. The bad animations are about 5 seconds slower than
I
all
gotta,
the other possibilities. Every animation
I will try to, so maybe after this game I'll try to do some stuff around.
1.61 seconds. And now we have the time it takes from the moment the guard is taken out until the moment the hostage picks an escape point, as well as the time it takes for the hostage to reach that escape point. Except the time it takes to run to an escape point isn't just one simple number. Many more things can throw a wrench in the process. The biggest one is
I
guards
thought we
getting
were a little bit higher.
hostages need to path around obstacles, including guards and other hostages, and they're not always great at it. One annoyingly placed guard can easily completely erase any chance of completion around the path. On top of that, NPCs can be unloaded when Bond is far enough in looking away from them. An unloaded hostage has a much simpler way of moving. They stay at a node on the navigation graph and check the distance to the next one. They wait until they would have run that distance if they were actually running, and then snap to the node if it's
darn.
They no longer calculate collisions or
They are in
obstacles,
packs.
even including those who are the right people. However, they do check if their position conflicts with another NPC. That's where the trouble lies. If the node they're trying to get to is already occupied,
These people are smart.
back at the start node, it manually runs the segment again, mapping around obstacles to stop. Also, since they snap directly to their target node, this is how hostages can escape at these points. In fact, it's the only way they can reach the escape zone. This is why runners avoid looking towards the back of the ship at the end of the run. Make sure not to load any hostage that's trying to escape there.
Maybe I
Another potential issue
should
is lag caused by a couple
update
dozen guards
OBS.
being alerted at once.
It's probably what I should do.
By only making noise when strictly necessary, and by
Okay, what is
limiting
up with
as many cars
my...
from the way as possible. Of course, that also reduces the chances of them impeding hostages. The guards can also sometimes throw grenades or blow up
What's up with my teammates?
We'll gather all of these issues into
Either these must be bots or...
no matter how hard we try, factors like these are impossible to model accurately.
Yeah, this game might be dead. It might be dead.
To assume that the conditions are ideal every time and only focus on the probabilities that can actually
Or it's dying a lot quicker than I thought it would.
no matter what happens, the probability of success cannot go higher than the odds.
I don't mind facing bots, but it's just sad because Split Gay is my favorite, it's my favorite arena shooter so far.
The second is to do statistical
Probably even more than Quake and Unreal Tournament, because well, I do appreciate those ones also. The big difference is that I like the portals, and the game's only like 15 gigabytes, so it's not even that big. And it's easy to run, and it's fun to play.
One of the 6 escape points leading to this escape time distribution.
So,
to determine when exactly Sam starts escaping,
I am going to
there's an equal chance to hit the head or
I'm going to stop the stream, and then I will probably get back again. And it's fine for me. I just want to see if we can actually wait, hold on.
Since both of these events are independent of each other,
Okay.
it's just like rolling 2 dice trying to get double sixes. To get a double 6, you have a
well, I guess I'll watch this slightly. Let's do... I'm just gonna do a scan, because I like these aesthetics. So if I can like try to fix it or something, but this is still good, so yeah, it's not bad, but I think I could do a better job. Okay, bye for now.